This guy was the most terrifying necromancer on the continent, raising an army of 20 million undead, all to destroy the empire that left those 20 million to die from a plague. But his reign ended at the hands of the purest knight he had ever encountered. However, he is reborn 200 years later as the hero's own descendant. But now, his bloodline is falling into ruin, and he will do whatever it takes to bring it back to the top, the very family that once rose to power built upon his death. All this for the sake of his own ego. But before we dive in, make sure to drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, and let's get into it. It all starts in a freezing glacial wasteland, in the middle of a bloody war, with countless bodies scattered across the ground. And right there among the survivors, there's a guy realizing that his suffering is about to end. Permanently. It looks like the holy sword of the Order pierced right through his heart with deadly precision, and the knights from the Order are actually talking about how they finally managed to catch him. The demon of the continent, Archimonde, the greatest necromancer of all time. On the other side, Archimonde starts to think that this time he's really dying. So he begins to look back at what happened. A massive war that lasted for 10 whole years across the entire continent. It was a joint operation with elite forces infiltrating his ranks, while the Imperial Army attacked the front lines. He had even set up defense lines anticipating this, but in the end he failed, and that was basically his complete defeat. And all of this happened because of a single knight, the leader of the Northern Knights, Burkle Rhineland. Burkle walks up to Archimonde, telling him that he didn't achieve this just with his own power. It was because countless people shed their blood, and held the front lines that his sword could finally reach him. So now he tells Archimonde to just give up once and for all, for the peace of the continent. But Archimonde, absolutely furious, tells him to shut his mouth, because they were the ones who just stood by and watched while people died from the plague, and now they dare to cry out for peace. He shouts that they're worse than animals, that every single one of those so-called knights are nothing but disgusting hypocrites, and he swears he's going to kill every last human being with his own bare hands. So he starts to unleash his maximum power, which honestly terrifies the other knights. They realize he's trying to use necromancy, even in this near-death state. One of the knights in the back warns Burkle that it's dangerous, and if they don't kill Archimonde right now, things are going to go really bad. But the leader says enough is enough. He tells the necromancer that it was 20 million. 20 million people fell to the plague, and he used necromancy to turn them into his army, and he points out that this was the spark that started the war. Archimonde shoots back, saying that's total nonsense. He asks if Burkle really thinks he doesn't know that. He even taunts him, saying that people from Burkle's own hometown must be among those 20 million. So the only thing he really wants is revenge, right? Archimonde asks if he's wrong, but Burkle gets dead serious. He says he only has one reason to fight, strictly for the future of the children, and that immediately leaves the necromancer in shock, asking what he means. At that exact moment, his body freezes in an instant. He hears Burkle say that he has to leave his choices, his convictions, and his hope for the children. The necromancer starts to reflect on his own defeated self, staring into the eyes of a pure knight, a gaze totally different from his own. Then, once again, Burkle repeats it, saying that he fights for the descendants of the next generation. That is his true reason. Finally, Archimonde's elemental barrier shatters, and he just drops to his knees on the ground. He tells Burkle he can kill him now, but what surprises everyone is that Burkle simply drops his sword. The knights in the back beg him to wait, because if he tosses aside the holy sword like that, he could end up dying by mistake. But Burkle just walks right up to Archimonde. The necromancer still warns him that he won't die so easily, but right after that his head is completely severed. In his final moments, he keeps staring at Burkle. That night, with a pure heart, Burkle's squad finally celebrates that Archimonde is dead, and amidst those cheers, the necromancer's final thought is the sound of his own head hitting the ground. And so, that was the end of the Great 10-Year War, and also the end of the demon of the continent, Archimonde, the great necromancer. Some time passes. On a dark, stormy night, inside a massive mansion, some maids are looking pretty happy. They're asking each other if they really just saw that the young master's lips actually moved. But little did they know that inside the mind of that little baby was the greatest villain of the continent himself. The two maids, totally clueless, call him young Master Klein. They show the baby a portrait of the Duchess, who is actually his mother, and ask him to try saying, "Mommy." Inside his head the protagonist realizes his body feels super heavy, but the maids just keep insisting for him to speak. And finally, when he opens his mouth to say something, he lets out a huge baby scream, yelling, "O guardians of the darkness, minions and soldiers, I, Archimonde, summon you and you must now obey my command," which immediately makes the two maids shake in their boots and start screaming in absolute terror right after. So 15 years pass since that catastrophic scene, and once again the very same maids are completely mesmerized by the young master. They're talking about that face, that hair, saying he is truly a masterpiece of God. Our young master Klein. They are really emotional, saying he looks incredibly handsome today. Simply dazzling. One of them even asks the young master what he eats to be so good looking. But right before the protagonist could say anything, he literally gets a bucket of cold water dumped on his head. A massive guy suddenly appears behind him, ordering the evil spirit to back off. Then the guy mentions it's pretty weird, because just a second ago the kid had the exact expression of Archimonde. This brute is Garrison Berkman, a priest from the Holy Order. He goes on to say that 3 more people have already been possessed, but luckily the purification wasn't too late for him. But our boy tells him it can't be easy saying so much nonsense with that much confidence. He asks if Garrison doesn't ever get tired of this so-called purification ritual, or whatever garbage he's been doing for years. But Garrison says it's not garbage. The soul of Archimonde still lingers in the young master's body, so this wicked soul needs to be purified periodically. Our boy insists that he is not Archimonde, but Garrison just points out that the demon's expression is back again. Our guy starts thinking this priest is definitely a complete lunatic, and slowly starts backing away, not wanting to draw more attention. But obviously the priest is super attentive and orders his goons to grab our boy. He declares that for the crime of insolence, they're going to give him a freezing holy water bath without any clothes on. Our boy begs him to stop, shouting that he's already said 1,000 times that he is an Archimonde, and that his name is Klein. And basically this was the kind of life Klein, or rather Archimonde, has been living for 15 whole years. He really didn't expect things to end up like this, because he knows for a fact that he died that day. He's absolutely certain his head got chopped off. But when he mysteriously opened his eyes again, he was in the body of a baby, and out of all the things he could have said, the very first words he yelled were an Archimonde necromancy chant. So thanks to that he was treated like an evil spirit, and locked up in a monastery as soon as he turned 3. And after a while he ended up meeting this guy, who claims to be a priest of the Holy Order. Our protagonist unfortunately had no idea that this would be the beginning of his disaster. Things like Garrison's great 24-hour prayer song, Garrison's freezing garlic bath, Garrison's purification fireworks show. He had to go through all sorts of torture in the name of a purification ritual. And even when he cried for help, nobody came to save him. And now 5 years later, our completely defeated boy is wearing a little party hat on his head. Meanwhile, his personal maid right next to him says she hopes young Master Klein lives like a hero's descendant and soon becomes a healthy member of the family. This girl is Klein's personal maid, Erin, and she prays to the Holy Spirit, and through holy prayer for him to be purified. But our boy, totally pissed off, grabs that party hat and throws it on the ground immediately, which makes Erin look super sad, and she tells him she actually made that hat herself. Instantly, our guy realizes he screwed up. He was way too emotional just now, and thinks she must have worked really hard to make it with those tiny little hands of hers. So he apologizes to Erin, saying he crossed the line. But just as he reaches down to pick up the hat, Erin mentions that actually Father Garrison was the one who knitted it, which instantly paralyzes our boy. He grabs the hat, completely furious, and right as he turns around to set it on fire, Garrison mysteriously appears right in front of him, calling him young Master Klein. Getting super emotional, the priest says he really didn't expect him to wear the hat he spent a week knitting with so much vigor. He's genuinely touched by the scene, but our protagonist looks right in his face and tells him he's never wearing that in his life, destroying the hat completely. Right on cue, the priest yells that the wicked soul of Archimonde has appeared, but our boy just shouts back, "Archimonde my ass." While they were arguing, someone walks into the room, bowing to Father Garrison, and asks if his purification ritual is over. This guy is the captain of the Red Carriage Knights, Dunkel. He mentions that the rumors about young Master Klein being Archimonde have been going around for over 10 years now, and the order has stated there are no more problems. This really surprises both of them, and Garrison quickly changes his tune, saying of course Captain Dunkel, telling him he can take all the time he needs. Seeing this, Klein thinks to himself that this psychopath doesn't even pretend to listen when he speaks, but is always kissing up to the Knight Captain. He figures this guy Garrison really knows how society works. At that moment, Garrison turns around and says he'll be taking his leave now, but just as a precaution, just in case something happens, the next purification ritual will be on Friday, so he needs to wash up and wait, keeping his body and mind very pure. Our boy just tells the psychopath to get out. Finally, with Garrison gone, Klein is completely fed up. He asks if a cleric can really just torture people like this for 5 years straight. He wonders if that guy is even a real priest, because he looks more like some kind of muscular demon. The innocent maid Eren goes up to our protagonist, and asks if he's really not Archimonde anymore. Our proto answers that yeah, definitely not. He doesn't even want to hear that name anymore. But in reality, he knows that if he actually said he was Archimonde, who knows what kind of torture he'd face. He should be focusing on recovering his body's strength, but instead he's dealing with stupid purification rituals. He remembers that ever since he revived, he's lived a life under constant surveillance because of the rumors about Archimonde when he was little. That's why he had to be locked up in a monastery for 7 whole years. He's really outraged by it all. He thought he had finally returned to the duchy, but now this priest tagged along with him. On the flip side, Captain Dunkel explains that Garrison might look like that, but he's actually a prosecutor, and there's definitely a reason he's here. The innocent Eren asks what he means by a prosecutor. What is that? Is he someone important? The captain explains that it's a title given to the strongest of the order, so he is a person with overwhelming power, someone that only the duke of their family could ever hope to face. This makes Eren really excited, cheering that the young master's family is super strong. The captain says, yeah, of course they are, but she wants to know something that makes her really curious. She wants to know who the strongest duke in the family's history is. The captain says that, well, the others are great too, but it's probably the current 7th duke. But immediately our boy chimes in and says it's the first. The captain asks what he means by the first. His own father is the 7th duke, but Klein insists, no, the first was the strongest of them all. This makes the captain get pretty serious, and he says he understands. Eren turns to him and asks if he saw that. The young master really likes the first duke the best, since he's been staring at that painting this whole time. But Klein thinks to himself that liking him is a bit much. In truth, he really couldn't have imagined that this would happen. The captain mentions that now that he thinks about it, it's been 200 years since the first duke founded this family. Our protagonist thinks about those 200 years. He still can't really believe it, but he supposes he'll have to accept it sooner or later, that he, Archimonde, the great necromancer, would now be over 200 years old, and yet 7 generations of dukes have passed, and that so-called first duke of the family, the one he believes is the strongest, is none other than Berkel Rhineland, the former leader of the Night Order. And simply put, this is the beginning of the new Archimonde, where he was reborn as a descendant of the man who killed him. But the very next day, our boy was having a nightmare about the exact day of his death, the moment Berkel Rhineland said he had to kill him for the future of the children. As soon as he woke up from the nightmare completely spooked, he mutters to himself that he had a crappy dream. Then he starts to remember who he really is. Archimonde, a legendary necromancer once feared as the demon of the continent. Even though that's in the past now, he remembers losing control in a fit of rage and nearly destroying the entire continent, ultimately dying at the hands of the Knight of the North, Berkel Rhineland. But when he opened his eyes again, 200 years had passed. He was reborn as a direct descendant of that bastard, and to top it off, with all his memories perfectly intact, the only thing he really can't get used to is this stupid white hair. While he was talking to himself, Garrison walks into his room, commenting that young Master Klein talked quite a bit in his sleep. The priest suspiciously asks if he was dreaming about his days as Archimonde again. Our boy just thinks about how much of a psychopath Garrison is, a lunatic who treats him like he's actually Archimonde and has tortured him for years. He knows that for now, he needs to pretend as much as possible that he isn't the necromancer in front of this guy. So, looking a bit nervous, he plays it off, saying he's actually just been really tired lately. But incredibly, who comes crawling out from under his bed is the maid Erin. She tells the young master she heard absolutely everything he said while sleeping, and to make matters worse, she starts mimicking him. Trail of the continent, kill them all. I, Archimonde, command you. Klein's super tense tells her to keep quiet and asks when he ever said something like that. The priest looks dead serious, debating whether he should move today's purification up. But before he can, the butler Berkman enters the room, announcing that the swordsmanship demonstration is about to begin. Garrison decides to thank Erin for her report, and declares that young Master Klein will need to double the time of his purification ritual later. Our protagonist is absolutely furious, wishing this crazy psychopath would just stop with his nonsense. A few hours later, Klein, Erin, and the butler Berkman are walking through the mansion. Klein asks about this swordsmanship demonstration, since his father has never called him to one before. The butler explains that the Duke himself gave orders for his attendance this time, and it seems the people from the branch families have also arrived. Beside him, Aaron tries to cheer him up, saying the young master can at least just watch. In response, our guy rips open a little bag and pulls out a cookie for her. Watching this, the butler scolds the girl, saying she keeps making cheeky requests to the young master over and over. But Klein tells the butler not to be so hard on her, since he can see how happy that cookie makes her. Still curious, he thinks about these branch family members, who are basically just annoying worms that pop up every now and then. And sure enough, these so-called worms are already glaring at Klein with pure disgust. They start mocking him, asking if that's the one they call Klein, or if they should call him Lord Archimond or Big Brother Archimond. One of them mentions that he rotted away in the Empire's monastery for 7 years, and asks if he has any stories to tell. Another sarcastically warns them to be careful, or he might end up cursing them if they aren't cautious. Observing these freaks, our boy notes that these guys are basically his distant cousins from the North Branch, the West Branch, and others he doesn't even remember the names of. The reason these unknown faces are being so bold against a direct bloodline member is simple. The main family is crumbling. Ignoring the insults, Klein turns his attention to the arena, where a huge duel between two young knights is taking place. The blue-haired one, Dalton, insults the blonde kid, calling him a little bastard and demanding he take the fight seriously. The blonde kid, Delane, without breaking a sweat, just apologizes to Dalton and says the fight is already over. Dalton gets furious, and tells him to shut his mouth. Watching from above, Klein thinks that if there's any hope left for his family, it's him, the eldest son of the Rhineland family, a promising prodigy, and his half-brother Delane Rhineland. It's highly likely that this swordsman family's reputation is only being maintained thanks to Delane's talent. Mid-fight, Dalton yells that it's going to be different this time. Klein keeps tracking every single movement. Suddenly something sparks in his eyes. He realizes this is the very first time he's actually watching a sword fight since being reborn as Klein. Mysteriously, he begins to absorb all the sword movements. He can see the footwork, the response time, the exact moment to push off the ground, and even the flow of mana. He sees it all crystal clear and knows this is the Rhineland family's secret technique, the meteor sword. In a flash, Delane dodges the strike, appears right behind Dalton, and sends his opponent's sword flying, defeating him and ending the duel. The branch family members are shocked, completely impressed that he successfully pulled off the meteor sword in front of so many people. They quickly realize this is a warning, showing them that the main Rhineland bloodline is still going strong. Klein is confused by what he just saw through his own eyes. While trying to figure it out, his half-brother Delane walks up and asks how long he's been standing there. Our boy lies and says he just got there. Delane smiles and says he should have told him he was coming because he would have tried harder if he knew his brother was watching. Looking at Delane, Klein admits to himself that this guy is literally perfect. Elite skills, great looks, and an awesome personality. Changing the subject, Klein asks if the branch families are here to squeeze more money out of them again, figuring it's going to be a problem. Before they can keep talking, someone else approaches to congratulate Delane, saying it's truly surprising he's already mastered the family technique at his age. This man is the 7th patriarch of the Rhineland family, Heinkel Rhineland, their own father. Our proto knows that for Heinkel, Delane's existence is probably his last shred of pride. Right behind the patriarch is Captain Dunkel, who also praises Delane, pointing out that knights his age are entirely incapable of that level of mana and precision, calling his talent literally overwhelming. Delane, a bit embarrassed, says he's not quite at that level yet, but the patriarch insists that a Rhineland knight must always be the best in the Empire, reminding him that those were the final words of the first Duke, Berkel Rhineland, and he should engrave them in his heart. After that, Heinkel turns to his second son, Klein. He examines the boy's body and sighs, saying that it seems he still can't feel any mana coming from him. Klein quickly apologizes. Deep down, he knows his so-called father is someone who only gets angry and demands things when there are expectations, and since his potential is gone, the old man just sees him as a useless burden. The captain tries to defend the boy, explaining that young Master Klein spent the most crucial years for a swordsman locked up in a monastery, making his situation very complicated. Even so, the branch family start gossiping. They whisper about how the second son really has no mana, wondering if he even has the strength to protect the family, and pointing out how completely different he is from his brother. Trying to brush it off, Heinkel tells Klein that it's okay and there are many other paths besides the sword, but in Klein's mind, fury is taking over. He honestly doesn't care about the insults aimed at him, but hearing things like the Rhineland family is on its last legs pisses him off to no end. He remembers that the bastard Berkel risked his life for these people, and seeing them act like complete mediocre idiots is infuriating. After a quick chat, the three of them leave, leaving our boy all alone. Right behind Klein, Dalton Conwell, the arrogant kid who just lost, walks up. Dalton taunts him, asking if the young master really doesn't know how to use a sword, claiming that he's nothing but a disgrace to the direct bloodline. Klein immediately claps back. He casually suggests that seducing girls backstage at balls must be his family's point of pride then. Dalton gets completely furious and asks how he knows about that. Our boy calls him naive or just plain stupid, asking if he really thought rumors wouldn't spread just because he solved the situation with money. Totally losing it, Dalton charges at him. Our proto just calmly takes a step to the side, sticks his foot out, and makes Dalton fall flat on his face, completely humiliating him. Klein starts walking away, telling him to stop taking his anger out on him just because Delane crushed him. Furious and embarrassed on the ground, Dalton screams that Klein is just a bastard who doesn't even know who his own mother is. This instantly triggers our proto. He's deeply pissed, not because of the mother he doesn't even know, but because of this cheap sense of superiority aimed at the direct bloodline. He wonders why the hell the family of the continent's hero has fallen so low. Before a real fight could break out, Captain Dunkel appears, saying enough is enough, and warns Dalton that he won't just stand by and watch his insolence. The kid storms off yelling that Klein is lucky his guard dog saved him. But little did he know, this was the final straw for our proto. Klein stares at the captain's sword and asks Dunkel if he happens to have a spare one on him. Later that same night, deep in the dark forest, standing in front of a massive rock, Dunkel hands over the sword he asked for, but questions why he needs a blade at this hour. Our boy replies that he wants to test something out. He mentions the moves Delane was doing earlier, and Dunkel asks if he's talking about the meteor sword. The proto confirms, saying he has something to check and tells the captain to step aside. Dunkel steps back thinking to himself that Klein still holds deep lingering regrets about the path of the sword. He knows that unfortunately the young master's body has no mana, meaning he can't become a knight, let alone copy the meteor sword, which was created by the first Duke himself. But inside the mind of Klein/Archimond, the scene he absorbed in the arena was strangely vivid. The footwork, the timing of the dash, the trajectory of the blade, and the constant flow of mana, he remembered it all. The exact moment he opens his eyes, the entire atmosphere around him shifts. Feeling that overwhelming presence and power, Dunkel snaps his head around in shock, wondering what the hell is going on and where that energy is coming from. When the captain looks, he's left in absolute awe. Our manaless boy just flawlessly executed the meteor sword, delivering a clean dry slash that cleaved the massive rock right down the middle. It proves without a doubt that he holds terrifying power with a blade. Completely stunned, Dunkel rushes over and asks how on earth he managed to do that, and Klein, even more lost than he is, just replies that he has no idea how he did it, but it somehow worked. The next day, the maid, Erin, is extremely nervous about the situation, asking what is going on. Meanwhile, the priest himself wonders what that is, and comments to Erin that it can't be real. Now he can hold his breath underwater for over a minute. The priest, highly amused, asks if this is for real, and jokes that apparently the young master is now some kind of fish. The priest then suggests, since he's a fish, how about they do the next purification ritual inside an aquarium? The moment our protagonist surfaces, he is furious. He starts yelling that there will be no aquarium, and asks why the hell the purification ritual lasted even longer today. The priest, noticing he's done, comments that today went by really fast. Our protagonist questions him, "What do you mean fast?" The priest explains that he felt a sinister energy coming from the young master's room today. Klein asks what kind of sinister energy he's talking about, muttering that every single day the priest comes just to bother him for some idiotic reason. Right nearby, observing everything, the captain informs the young master that Lord Dalton has sent him an invitation. Our boy asks who that is, and the captain clarifies that it's Lord Dalton, the one he had a clash with alongside Delane the other day. In the letter, Dalton says he wants to apologize for the incident at the training grounds, which makes Klein highly suspicious. He really doesn't think that kid wants to apologize. Reading the letter carefully, he realizes it's an invitation to a hunting contest. After making such a scene at the training grounds, extending an invitation like this is pretty weird. Dalton clearly needs a pretext to lure him out of the house. Curious about the situation, Dunkel asks if he's going to accept. Klein replies that he has no reason to refuse, and besides, there's something he needs to test. He remembers replaying Delane's swordsmanship, which he saw days ago, over and over in his mind. Then he finally understood he can perfectly replicate any technique he sees just once, even without knowing the reason why he's able to do it. Hearing this, Dunkel says he understands and goes to prepare the carriage. However, to their surprise, the priest approaches. He mentions he heard about the hunting contest and suggests going along with them. Klein, irritated, asks why he would go and who the hell invited him. The priest simply replies by recalling what he had said earlier. Today, for some reason, he feels a sinister energy. Sometime later, inside the carriage, Aaron is lying down, sleeping on the priest's lap. Klein grumbles, saying this is exactly why she shouldn't have come. The priest, however, gives her a pillow and explains that the terrain in the western forest is quite rough, making the first trip pretty difficult. He advises her that if she sleeps a little, she'll feel better. The priest, deeply moved, comments that his young master has truly grown up and is now doing cute things like worrying about others. Indignant, Klein replies that he wasn't talking to him, but to Aaron. After ignoring the priest's nonsense, Klein begins to observe the scenery and notices that this place has also changed a lot. When he was here in the past, it was a place covered only in snow and corpses. It's mind-blowing to think that this ice field lasted for 200 years and has now survived so green and full of life. This was to be expected from that Burkle guy. Apparently, he was quite different from the rest. A few hours later, Dunkel finally opens the carriage door, announcing they have arrived at the Conwell family's grand mansion. Looking at the estate, our protagonist realizes this is where that bastard lives. The mansion is even more luxurious than the main estate of the Rhineland, one of the region's 3 great families. He reflects that this is just a hunting contest between kids, which shows they have a lot of money to burn. The moment our boy steps inside, Dalton appears accompanied by several dogs. Dalton asks what he is looking at so intently. Dalton brags, saying the ceilings here are high, the walls are thick, and the construction is top-notch. He asks Klein what he thinks of his mansion and taunts him, asking if the luxury matches the money they squeezed out of the main family. Dalton continues, saying he knows Klein was locked up in the monastery for 7 years, so he probably knows nothing about the real world. However, the only thing our protagonist was paying attention to were the dogs, which looked quite starving. Ignoring the taunts, Klein asks since when a hunting contest turned into a tea party. Calm and collected, Dalton replies that Klein is indeed very impatient. He already knew he'd hear something like that, so he prepared a special attraction. He tells Klein to pay close attention as they are about to start, and right then he unleashes the dogs. Dalton explains that they scattered food across half the mountain, and that the sense of smell of starving dogs is up to 100,000 times stronger than a human's. When these animals, hypnotized by the scent, run after the food, it will be the chance to hunt them. The goal is to use bows and arrows to kill them before they can get a single taste of the food. Highly excited, Dalton asks if Klein understands the rules, and claims this will be a very successful hunt. Right next to them, Aaron appears, looking very sleepy. Immediately, Dalton approaches her and asks if this is the maid Klein brought along. He mocks her, saying he doesn't understand what a little girl like her could possibly do to make Klein care for her so much. Dalton then asks Aaron to follow him, claiming he can give her a much better job. Instantly, Klein grabs Dalton tightly. Flustered, Dalton asks what his problem is. Our boy, without hesitating, tells him to take his hand off her before he destroys it right there and then. Furious, Dalton lets go of Aaron's arm and says that Klein is in fact extremely arrogant. Right after, Dalton mounts his horse and tells Klein to follow him. Klein gets on another horse and lets Dunkel know he'll be gone for a moment. He orders Dunkel to stay there with Aaron and not to follow them. The knight warns him that it's too dangerous to go alone. However, our protagonist hands him an item, explaining that it's a magic flare scroll. It's basically a single-use magic paper capable of transmitting different signals, and it can be activated even by someone without magical power. By tearing the paper, the linked symbol reacts and sends an alert. Klein whispers to Dunkel that the priest followed them all the way there, which makes him feel like something fishy is going on. He warns him that if he suddenly disappears, it means something went wrong. Worried, Dunkel asks what he means by went wrong. Klein confirms that's exactly it. If the priest vanishes out of nowhere, Dunkel must tear the paper immediately, and then the linked symbol will appear on the back of his hand. Right after, Klein rides off, saying he's counting on Dunkel. A few hours later, our protagonist continues riding, tracking, and looking for Dalton. He figures his opponent couldn't have gone that far, and if he follows the forest trail, he'll catch up to him. Finally, he reaches his destination. Dalton greets him by saying he finally arrived, and mocks him by asking if he didn't take too long. The guy is surrounded by several dogs lying on the ground, apparently killed during the hunt. Klein gets off his horse, glares at Dalton, and asks what he's trying to do and what kind of bullshit this is. Dalton replies that this is the grand finale of today's competition, because the final prey he's going to hunt is Klein himself. Our boy asks, in a challenging tone, if he really plans on killing him. Dalton confirms it. He plans to cut off Klein's head and toss it to Delane. Dalton says that after that he will tell Delane that the Rhineland family is truly a joke, just an empty shell with no power or authority. He guarantees they won't even have a chance to fight back in the end. As soon as Dalton gives the signal, several mercenaries appear surrounding the area. Dalton continues his monologue stating that, ultimately the title of Duke will end up belonging to his branch family. He says Klein should regret being born into such a stupid family, and sneers, "Oh, that's right, tomorrow everyone will be saying that the young master of the Rhineland, the declining clan of northern swordsmen, died as dog food." And once again, Dalton pushes his luck, provoking the reincarnation of Archimonde to the absolute limit. At that moment, our boy remembers Burkle's words about the future of some children, and he simply bursts into a sadistic, uncontrollable laughter, terrifying everyone. In the midst of that bizarre laughter, Dalton asks what's so funny, and wonders if Klein has gone insane. But, in a split second, Klein's expression changes completely. He coldly declares that Dalton is just a mere insect who dared to crawl around without knowing his place. The murderous pressure Klein exudes instantly terrifies Dalton. Our protagonist continues, stating that the Rhineland family was built at the cost of his own death in the past, and yet Dalton dares to insult and humiliate it. At that exact moment, Klein begins to unleash his full power, to the point where the sky itself turns red. Greatly shocked, Dalton asks if that is magic, but realizes it would be impossible, since Klein theoretically doesn't possess any magical power. Klein then replies that it isn't magic, but rather what they call demonic energy. Instantly Dalton and the mercenaries panic, wondering what is happening and who the hell this guy is. Remembering ancient legends, Dalton stammers and asks if he just said demonic energy. Without answering his question, our boy begins his chant. He recites that he summons the ancient evil spirits buried by time, declaring that he will raise them from the shadows and make them descend into the light. From that moment on, he commands again in his own name, "Devour, devour, and keep on devouring." Terrified, Dalton screams that this can't be real and calls him by his true name, Archimonde. Meanwhile, our protagonist just lets out a dark chuckle. He then gives the final order to his evil spirits. Until those wandering souls disappear completely, they must devour absolutely everything, leaving not a single trace of them behind. Right after Klein says this, he begins to recall something he thought he had forgotten. But in truth, he almost did forget, because 200 years have passed, and 200 years feel like distant, fleeting days. Yet, he can still feel it and remember it clearly. Countless voices echoing in the darkness, the voices of the dead calling out to him. He instantly remembers this sensation, resonance, vibration, afterimage, and memory. It's this feeling of nostalgia that overwhelms him once again. Back in reality, Dalton screams that this can't be true, demanding to know how he could actually be Archimonde. Our protagonist, extremely calm, replies that they did indeed used to call him by that name. The mercenaries behind him start wondering, "What do you mean, Archimonde? Wasn't that just a rumor? Besides, those things behind him really do look like skeletons." After staring at each other for a moment, they all burst out laughing, wondering what kind of joke this is. They say they're just a bunch of worthless skull fragments, and that after all that posturing, this trash is all he has to show for it. However, our protagonist, dead serious, questions them. Dalton asserts that of course it's trash, bragging that he himself has destroyed hundreds of these skeletons on his missions. Next to him, a curious mercenary asks why they look like that and if those black things are bones. Another replies, "Who cares? Each of them can take a bone as a souvenir." However, Dalton orders the front line to deal with the ones blocking the way, while the rest clear a path. He then orders the archers to attack. Dalton yells, "Fire!" and the arrows are launched toward our protagonist and his sort of skeleton troop. A hail of arrows rains down on him, while Klein remains calm and untouched, as if nothing is happening. He faces the arrows as if they were nothing. With a smirk on his face, Dalton mocks him saying, "Poor Klein." He claims the kid is going to be crushed by those arrows until he turns into mincemeat, but at the very last second, Dalton notices something strange. The movement of the skeletons. They surged forward to defend our protagonist. With their shields, they block the rain of arrows, while Klein flashes an arrogant smile. He comments that 200 years is a long time, and apparently no one seems to recognize these warriors. Completely terrified, the mercenaries wonder where the hell those shields came from out of nowhere. Our boy replies that they might indeed be confused if those were ordinary skeletons. Highly apprehensive, the enemies ask what kind of abominations these creatures are, and Klein warns them that his skeletons are very different. Mentally he asks his old acquaintance Burkle to take a good look at this, as he commands his army and deactivates the front-line defensive formation. Klein continues thinking about the future of the North, which Burkle protected even after death. Those who ridiculed and insulted him, Burkle should watch as they are torn to pieces by his hands. Next he orders all skeleton units to prepare for the attack. Once they all enter combat mode, Klein gives the signal to advance. The Army of Darkness charges head-on at the mercenaries, where Dalton is hiding. All the men are shocked, wondering how it's possible for those creatures to run so fast. Dalton, trying to keep his cool, tells them not to panic so much, as they are just simple skulls. Little did they know, it wouldn't be that simple. One of the mercenaries is already sliced in half, and right after, others start dropping dead. Dalton screams at them not to freeze up, asking what the hell they are doing and demanding they hold the defensive line. On the other side, our protagonist orders the second-line crossbowmen to surround them and lock onto their targets. Right above, in the trees, the skeleton archers prepare to attack. Not understanding what is happening, the mercenaries fall into a panic. Apparently the enemy also has ranged attack units, which is completely absurd to them. At Klein's signal to open fire, the bone arrows are shot. Several mercenaries who didn't notice the ambush die instantly, without even knowing where the strike came from. Among the bodies, Dalton trembles with fear, thinking that this is absolutely impossible. He can't accept it, this can't be happening, and these are definitely not the type of skeletons he knows. He realizes that if they keep going like this, they will be completely annihilated in no time. So, he orders the mercenaries to drop their crossbows, stop reloading, and switch to close quarters combat. Obviously the mercenaries can't hear him too well amidst the chaos and the sound of clashing blades. Trying to convince himself, Dalton mutters that these creatures are just damn undead that are worth nothing. Right after managing to slice off the head of one of them, Dalton gets excited and celebrates. It was exactly as he thought, if you aim for the head, they die. But little did he know he would be attacked the very next second, managing to dodge the strike only by a hair. Confused, he wonders what is going on, since he had clearly ripped the monster's head off. On the other side of the battlefield, our protagonist comments that people usually think that if you cut off their heads, skeletons won't get back up, but he had already warned them his skeletons are very different. Basically, the headless skeleton moves forward, crouches down, picks up its own head, and places it right back on its neck. Only Klein knows that this is the exact reason why he, under the name of Archimonde, was able to devastate the continent in the past. Meanwhile, Dalton, in a state of shock, just watches the creature put its head back on its body with its own bare hands. Only Klein understands that spirits summoned with his dark energy don't die easily, and on top of that, they all follow orders and execute tactics flawlessly. Watching the bizarre scene, the mercenaries wonder what the hell those monsters are and why they keep reviving endlessly. Our boy assesses the situation and thinks that, with his current body, this number of warriors is his limit for now. He glares at them all and asks, with a sadistic smile, if they can continue now, which leaves the survivors even more terrified. Meanwhile, back at the Conwell mansion, Oren asks the priest if the story is true, and if the young master really did that. The priest replies that it certainly is, and that this is the story from when the young master was still at the monastery. Highly amused, she comments that just picturing the scene makes her want to laugh. The priest notices this and points out that, apparently, Miss Oren really likes the young master. She replies in a very cute way that of course she does. The young master is a very nice, kind, and sweet person, and he also always has plenty of cookies for her. She confesses that she thinks of him as the most warm-hearted person in the whole world. Little did the poor girl know that at this exact moment, he is committing a massive massacre in the forest. Back to the fight, Dalton defeats another skeleton, or at least cuts its head off for the time being. But right after, the creature regenerates. Exhausted, furious, and indignant, Dalton grumbles that if he could at least stop their regeneration, the situation would be much better. Finally, he glares at Klein from afar and gets an idea. If he wants to eliminate the summons, what he needs to do is eliminate the summoner himself. He starts screaming that playtime is over, and that it doesn't matter if the enemies are dead or alive. If Klein dies, it all ends. So, in an act of desperation, he orders the death of our protagonist. But little did Dalton know that everything had been calculated by Klein from the very beginning, because our protagonist, for some unknown reason, can anticipate every move. With his ability by recalling a technique he saw just once, he can imitate it flawlessly. In shock upon seeing his combat stance, Dalton recognizes the technique. It's Delane's, the secret skill of the Rhineland family, the meteor sword which is used against him once more, defeating him in the blink of an eye. Appearing out of thin air right behind Dalton, our boy warns him not to think he's going to die that easily, because his true judgment is only just beginning. After Dalton is defeated and sliced into several pieces, Klein says he was right. If you kill the summoner, all of a necromancer's creations lose their power. Archimonde was defeated precisely because he couldn't overcome this weakness. However, he thinks the twist of fate is truly bizarre. Having the power of Archimonde, the necromancer who used demonic energy, along with the power capable of protecting him, the very ability of the Rhineland family, made his enemy's blood even stronger. In Dalton's final moments, Klein tells him that now that he has been born into this body, he can no longer ignore it. Flustered, the kid asks what the hell he is talking about. He finally dies, while Klein simply asks Burkle to wait for him. This is his family, ruined after 200 years, and he himself will raise it from the shadows once again. Inside his own mind, Dalton wakes up in a very strange place, completely pitch black. He wonders where he is, since it's so dark he can't see a thing. Moreover, this feeling is incredibly strange. As if he were bound to something, finally things start revealing themselves, and he asks what that is. Right next to him, someone approaches, noting that he has finally woken up. He explains that this is the place where souls arrive beyond the world he lived in, the so-called beyond, created by himself, Archimonde. The kid asks what he means by Archimonde's beyond. The necromancer then reminds Dalton that when he was alive, he starved and tortured dogs, committing abuses in the name of hunting. He perfectly remembers the amused expression on his face. Highly agitated, the kid snaps that he is talking pure bullshit and should at least make some sense. He orders him to let him go right now, or else. But in that exact moment he notices something weird and tells him to wait a second. He is absolutely sure his body was pierced by Klein's sword. So why is he perfectly fine now? Standing before him, Archimonde reveals that he is actually dead. He is merely returning the sins of his past life to him. That is the true purpose of this beyond. The nervous kid denies it, telling him to stop spouting nonsense about Archimonde, and release him immediately. Archimonde simply replies that whether he believes it or not matters very little. What truly matters is that the time has come to pay for his sins. With that he summons several dogs, the very same dogs Dalton used for his hunts. Watching these starving beasts, Dalton realizes he is completely screwed. Archimonde tells him to listen closely to the screams of the lives he extinguished, and to remember that, from now on, this is the hell he created for himself. The starving dogs begin eating Dalton alive, while he begs them to please stop, screaming that it hurts too much. Back in reality, even though he is dead, Dalton's body begins to cry. Standing in front of him, our boy simply smiles and watches calmly. Shortly after, his skeleton army approaches, seemingly wanting to communicate with him to end the contract. He agrees. Since he accepted their request, he will reward them as well. In exchange for their help, he will break the curse binding them, and grant everyone their freedom. His skeleton army begins to dissolve before his eyes, and the spirits finally find their peace. Our boy stares at those bodies, thinking that having your bones broken and scattered to the wind, that is true death. But then why was he revived again, and what is the purpose of this? To Klein's surprise, someone else approaches, commenting that dabbling in necromancy is truly unexpected of young Master Klein. The protagonist realizes this person saw everything. Curious, he asks who he is. The masked man replies that he doesn't need to know, and realistically, he probably wouldn't even recognize him anyway. In that instant, this background character starts using his power, while our protagonist just watches. All the dead mercenaries rise again, and Klein recognizes this as a soul return art, a technique that manipulates corpses. Apparently this guy is a necromancer. The necromancer excitedly declares that Dalton failed, but the corpses will still be quite useful. Meanwhile, back at the mansion, a very happy Aaron goes up to Dunkel and asks if he wants to hear some of the young master's childhood stories, saying they are hilarious. He tells her he will listen to them later, his eyes fixed on the magic flare scroll. He wonders why the young master would carry an item only used for emergencies. Furthermore, it's been 3 hours since he and Lord Dalton entered the forest, and there is still no news. He has a terrible gut feeling about this. Getting his horse ready, he mutters that he can't just sit there and needs to go look for them right now. At that moment, a few of the household knights approach and ask Sir Dunkel to wait a moment. They tell him he can't abandon his post while the hunting contest is still ongoing, suggesting he wait a little longer. The captain glares at them dead serious, recognizing the Conwell family crest on their armor. Since they are Dalton's guards, they probably have hidden motives. He declares that he is the captain of the exclusive knights of the Rhineland family and the guardian knight of young Master Klein. If they continue to interfere, he won't let it slide. He asks if he made himself perfectly clear, and the two terrified men quickly say yes sir. Right beside him, Aaron asks if something happened. The captain tells her to listen closely. The young master is taking too long, so he is going to look for him immediately. Because of this, Miss Aaron should head back to the mansion with the priest. However, Aaron mentions that the priest just left as well. This completely surprises Dunkel, who asks when he did that and why she didn't say anything. She simply replies that he had a very serious expression on his face, so she didn't want to bother him, adding that he mumbled something about a sinister presence. This makes the captain even more worried, cursing that damn priest in his mind. He then remembers Klein's warning about being followed, and the order to tear the scroll immediately if he disappeared. He realizes things have gone south, and this is definitely no coincidence. He mounts his horse and tears the magic scroll, convinced that something has definitely happened to the young master, and that he must get there as fast as possible. Now back to Klein facing the Necromancer. The boy thinks to himself that after the recent fight, all his demonic energy is depleted, and he can't use necromancy for the time being. But the Necromancer in front of him starts laughing. While our boy knows he won't be able to last much longer in this body, the Necromancer orders his army to move out and eliminate young Master Klein. All the mercenaries slowly march toward our protagonist. While he asks if this happens to be a soul return art, it seems they think they can kill him by using the same kind of necromancy. Just then he feels the signal on the palm of his hand, and realizes that the priest is approaching. He tells the Necromancer that he is definitely screwed now. Surprise! The Necromancer asks what he means. The very next second, an overwhelming presence descends from the sky, crushing the undead with a single sound. Priest Garrison intones his chant, "O light, grant rest to the dead." His monstrous strike defeats several of them at once. He turns to Klein and tells him he can now rest easy. Watching this in utter shock, the Necromancer asks who he is. Little did he know that Garrison is an agent of the Holy Church, and now that Garrison Berkman has joined the fight, this Necromancer is completely screwed. It is said that the agents are 3 human weapons who absolutely follow the Pope's orders. They are the Order's most powerful force, and the only ones capable of wielding the sacred weapons left by the Holy Grail. They say the power of each one is comparable to that of a fortress, so now this little Necromancer is seeing firsthand the power of a sacred relic. Among them, the one who holds the title of the strongest by pure brute force, is now standing before Klein, Garrison Berkman. Once again, the undead army charges at Garrison, clearly wanting to kill him, but he defeats them with his sacred relic, which appears to be a Bible. He states that he is speaking as a sinner, that he must seek and pray, for this will grant him the baptism of fire and atone for his sins. That is true mercy. He walks past each of the undead and crushes their heads with the Bible in his hand, or maybe just some holy book, as it isn't explained very well. Garrison declares that this is judgment. Watching from behind, the Necromancer thinks this is madness, and wonders why an agent of the Order is here. Besides, what the hell is that power? After his army is defeated, the two lock eyes. The Necromancer starts muttering that this sucks. They didn't say this would happen here, and he knows defeating someone like him is impossible. Unfortunately for him, Garrison grabs him and asks where he thinks he's going. The kid just begs him to stop and wait a minute so they can talk. Without a second thought, Garrison replies that the prayer isn't over yet. He tells him he should be grateful this judgment didn't fall upon him, and in the name of the light, grants him mercy by exploding the kid's head with his bare hands. All that remains of his skull is a single eye slowly bouncing toward our protagonist. Right after, Garrison walks up to him. Klein knows the priest only took a single step and moved forward without looking back, but with his mere presence and the sheer air pressure, over 20 bodies were blown to pieces. Garrison, his hand covered in blood, reaches toward Klein's head and mentions he felt a sinister Necromancer aura and came running immediately. This leaves our boy in shock. With a slight smile, Garrison says that while he is very curious about something, the energy he felt didn't seem to belong to that guy. Our protagonist realizes this brute bastard is actually quite smart. He knows that if he makes a single mistake right now, no matter how small, the priest will kill him on the spot. But to save the day, Dunkel finally appears, asking if Klein is alright. Our boy is surprised but happy to see him, as this time he really saved the day. Meanwhile, Klein realizes it is exactly as he thought. Using necromancy with this body was too much for him. He finally collapses to the ground. Dunkel runs toward him, asking what happened and whose blood all this is. Our protagonist just asks him to stop yelling for now, as he can hear him perfectly fine without it. Curious about the situation, Dunkel asks where Lord Dalton is. Our boy tells him he killed him because the guy tried to assassinate him. The next day, in the middle of a family tribunal, Dalton's father starts yelling at everyone. He says this makes no sense and demands to know what the hell Klein is trying to say, that his son Dalton tried to assassinate the young master. This guy is Count Delkin Conwell of the Conwell family. He tells everyone his son is a member of the Night Order who knows honor and loyalty, that his death is an injustice, and on top of that he is being accused of murder. He asks if the priority shouldn't be finding the real culprit. On the other hand, the Patriarch replies to Count Conwell that despite the long and intense interrogation, Klein hasn't changed his statement. He asks if there's anything else to add, because at the exact time both disappeared, records show about 20 private mercenaries were dispatched from the Conwell territory. This means it's certain Dalton was, at the very least, planning something. Hearing this, the Count gets very worried, not knowing what to say while thinking they are a bunch of idiots since he clearly told them to leave no evidence. Even so, he continues yelling, arguing it makes no sense. He claims Dalton was skilled enough to formally join the Night Order, and asks if it isn't true that Klein has never even wielded a sword. The crowd starts whispering that it's true, as they saw it at the fencing exhibition, and Dunkel himself said young Master Klein has no mana. How could he possibly kill Dalton like that? The Count realizes there's no way out if they find out his son tried to kill a direct descendant, as he'll be ruined too. So, he shifts the focus. First of all, he asks what kind of person young Master Klein is. He points out he is the son of Grand Duchess Claire, who only brought strange rumors while alive, and ever since the kid has been around, everything surrounding him revolves around Archimonde. He asks how they can believe the words of someone like that, and accuse his dead son of being a killer. Getting highly irritated, the Patriarch orders Count Conwell to watch his words, but the furious Count keeps yelling, saying he understands everything now. Since young Master Klein has no talent for swordsmanship, he hired someone to kill Dalton, and is now trying to frame him in such a vile way. Just then, to everyone's surprise, a voice says that's enough. Klein himself appears. He says that listening to all this, he sees the Count won't stop talking nonsense. He states that Dalton hired mercenaries to kill him, and he simply eliminated them in self-defense. And when that lunatic turned them into undead, Priest Garrison showed up and helped him. The Count yells that this is a lie, but our boy counters, asking, "What do you mean a lie? Is it also a lie that he is Archimonde?" This leaves the Count speechless, as our boy finally steps into the game. He remembers swearing this when he killed Dalton. He will rebuild the family founded upon his death with his own hands, and will not allow it to be tainted by other worms. And first, those from the branch families who dared to touch him will pay the price in blood. Right then, someone knocks on the door. The girl from before enters, apologizing for the delay. She announces that the captain of the Blue Holy Lance Knights, Leah, has just arrived. Our boy finally remembers her name as Leah, recalling she was also at the fencing exhibition. Everyone wonders what she's doing there, as this is a matter unrelated to the Fall Wyvern family. But the Patriarch answers that he allowed her in because Dalton had received missions from her Night Order in the past, giving her the right to attend the meeting. At that moment, Leah stares at our protagonist. He notices their eyes met out of nowhere. She raises her hand and says that, if it isn't too much trouble, she would like to speak privately with young Master Klein. This leaves our protagonist quite confused, wondering why she suddenly wants to talk to him. After thinking it over, the Patriarch permits it, provided it's only for a moment, and tells Klein to go talk to her without taking too long. Our protagonist thinks to himself that this is a pain, not understanding why knights are always like this. But after reflecting, he realizes this is actually a good opportunity. The reason she called him must be one of three things: confirmation, suspicion, or a test. He tells his father he understands and follows Leah through the mansion. To Klein, it really doesn't matter what it is. Once he sets a goal, he doesn't plan on running away. He will use them to his advantage. But finally, when they enter a private room, she slams her foot on the table, leans in close, and asks him face to face if she can touch him. Very nervous, Klein just wonders if that is even appropriate. Before this, it is said that Leah Rain Fallwyvern is the eldest daughter of the Fallwyvern family, one of the three great houses of the continent alongside the Rainland. She is the commander of the Blue Holy Lance Knights, Masters of the Spear. The official record of her strength states that during a monster extermination operation in the West, while scouting to protect civilians, Commander Leah eliminated high-level monsters all by herself. She wiped them all out on her own. Back to the present, she glares at our protagonist and asks what he is doing and if he's not coming. A bit nervous, he says he is. She simply tells him not to act like they are close, since the two of them aren't even real family. Our boy remembers his father telling him that his aunt is Duke Fallwyvern's second wife, making Leah basically his cousin. Klein knows Dunkel was the one who explained this to him, and he also knows she is the first wife's daughter. In other words, biologically, they don't share a single drop of blood. Finally, after they enter an isolated room, Leah warns him that from here on out it's just personal curiosity, and simply slams him against the door. She moves in all at once, leaving Klein quite confused and asking what she means by that. She gets very close to him and asks if she can touch him. Klein asks what kind of question that is. First, she grabs his hand and comments that it's soft and smooth, without any common wounds or blisters. It even feels like a baby's hand. Our highly nervous boy wonders why she keeps touching him like that. She continues saying that well-trained swordsmen sometimes don't even have calluses, although certain parts get hardened, like below the index finger where it touches the sword hilt, and the inside of the thumb. Tendons can't lie. Our boy, even more confused, asks what this has to do with anything. She then asks if he really has never used a sword. Just by looking at his hands, there are no traces that he has ever wielded a weapon in his life. But even so, he claims he defeated and survived Dalton and 20 mercenaries. She concludes by asking if perhaps he possesses another power. Instantly irritated, our boy pushes her away. He asks if that was what she was talking about. Apparently, she also wants to know if he is Archimonde or something like that. The protagonist recognizes that this girl is quite dangerous. This isn't simple curiosity. That gaze is looking for reactions, not answers. Silence would turn into acceptance and doubt into certainty. The easiest response is to act more confidently than she does. He fires the question back. What if it were true and he really was Archimonde? Instantly, she starts laughing. She questions how a random kid like him could ever be Archimonde. The word kid messes with Klein's head. He asks if she really just called him that. She confirms it wasn't a mistake and repeats, he is too small to be Archimonde. His proportions don't help at all, and his voice and physique command zero respect. In short, he is just a random kid. This leaves Klein's brain boiling with rage, hatred, and all the worst feelings possible. Apparently, the emotional damage was huge. She keeps going. If he is an Archimonde, doesn't know swordsmanship, and still defeated a knight, she will give him a kiss if he actually pulled that off. The provocation leaves him even more lost, wondering why she would do that. Due to the emotional damage, he becomes incapable of thinking rationally at the moment. Our boy starts wondering if this is part of some politicking or bribery, but she simply turns and walks away, noting that it's late and they can head back. Before leaving, she tries to add that Archimonde would never be like that, but before she can finish the sentence, the scene cuts. Young Master Klein and Lady Leia return to the tribunal. Our boy admits to himself that he was too naive. He is the useless second son, who was locked up by the Order for 7 years. If he merely said he killed Dalton in self-defense, it was obvious no one would believe him. Upon returning, Klein's father asks what the two of them were talking about. Before Leia can answer, our boy draws his sword and displays it, surprising everyone in the room. Right after, he points the blade at Count Delkin Conwell. He knows this is the only way to personally prove his word. He tells the Count to stop wasting time and settle the matter like a man, Northern style. Klein declares they will have a duel through a trial by combat. This instantly shocks everyone, and the Count asks what he just said. As everyone there knows, trial by combat is an ancient form of judgment used in the North when a conclusion is hard to reach. There are no restrictions on weapons or techniques, and the duel's outcome decides the verdict. In short, whoever wins the fight has the final say. Highly surprised, the old Count asks why he suddenly wants a trial by combat. Our boy replies that he has many reasons for it. He states that despite having proved Dalton tried to kill him first, the Count tried to frame him in his son's place, and insulted his mother in the process. Internally, Klein knows the truth is only half of that. He truly bears the name Klein, but his real identity is Archimonde, and he harbors no special feelings for the mother of his second life. The Count, still stunned, argues that the young master can't just do something like this out of nowhere. However, our boy demands he make up his mind quickly, asking if he plans to keep everyone waiting. The crowd starts whispering, impressed that there are still people who remember that ancient tradition, commenting that a trial by combat after so long will be quite interesting. Noticing the mood, the patriarch declares that this is a tradition passed down since the family's founder, and they cannot simply ignore it. As the 7th Duke of Rhineland, he guarantees everything will be decided according to the duel's outcome. All evidence presented so far will be invalidated. This makes the Count realize this is his big chance. The Count turns to the boy and asks if he's absolutely sure about this, pointing out that the young master possesses no magical power. He asks if Klein intends to send another knight in his place, already absolutely certain in his mind that he will have the brat killed. Our protagonist assures him that it doesn't matter and that he will see how he destroys him personally, just like he did to his dear son Dalton. The Count then accepts the challenge, setting the duel to take place in 4 days. Many people might think Klein acted on impulse to cause a scene, But he knows this is just the beginning. He will use the Conwell family as a stepping stone to prove his point to all the branch families present. He will show everyone exactly how he intends to reform the Rhinelands. Back in his room, Klein faces his older brother, Delane. Delane asks why he requested a trial by combat, questioning if he has lost his mind. He warns that Klein could die. Our boy replies that he has already said 1,000 times that he won't die. Their father already allowed it, so Delane should just accept the situation. Very nervous, Delane agrees, but reminds him that in a trial by combat, there is a champion system offering to fight in his brother's place. Klein refuses. He explains that the branch families only remain submissive in the north for one reason. The main family has the strongest swordsman, their father. Delane will inherit that strength in the future. Klein tells his brother to get real, as stepping into this trial in his place would give their enemies a legal opportunity to kill the legitimate heir of the Rhinelands. This leaves Delane surprised. Klein thinks it must be frustrating for his brother not to be able to act precisely because he is the heir, but he knows fighting alone is necessary to change his own reputation. He wouldn't hand this chance over to Delane on a silver platter. Despite understanding the logic, Delane confesses that when Klein was born, he was so excited to have a little brother that he ran straight to see him. At the time, the first thing he saw was an angel. To Delane, it doesn't matter if they have different mothers. The order ripped him away from them, and the family waited 7 years to get him back. And now, out of nowhere, he throws himself into a trial by combat. Delane grabs Klein, tells him to listen closely, and insists he will fight for him. At that exact moment, Dunkel enters the room. He apologizes for interrupting, but announces that Count Conwell has already chosen his champion. Curious, our boy asks who it is. The captain reveals his name is Randall, a knight expelled from the Empire who heavily stood out in combat. The reason for his expulsion was his uncontrollable murderous impulses. He killed compulsively, as if there were no tomorrow, and as if it were all just a game of pleasure for him. Elsewhere, this Randall appears, drinking what looks like the blood of his victims in a very macabre scene. He mutters to himself that he will face the young master of the Rhinelands, and that apparently, on that day, he will finally be able to hear a child's screams again after a very long time. A few days pass, and Dunkel approaches Klein, handing him the sword he requested. Dunkel explains that he forged the weapon exactly as asked. He tells the boy to be careful just in case, because the moment it clashes with a man-imbued sword, it will shatter. Our protagonist replies that this is perfect, and now they can leave. On the day of the duel, the crowd notices that Klein didn't run away, and actually showed up at the arena. Count Delkin Conwell comments in surprise that he never imagined the boy would come in person. He turns to the Patriarch and asks if he is okay with this, since his champion is an Imperial Knight and could be a huge problem for a son with no mana. The Count taunts him further, saying it's not too late to send Lord Delane in his place. The Patriarch remains completely silent. Meanwhile, Klein looks around the arena, wondering where his opponent is. Suddenly, a giant appears right behind him and lightly taps his shoulder. The man asks if he is Lord Klein, noting he is much younger than he had heard. He mocks the boy's thin arms, wondering what kind of sound they'll make when he snaps his neck. Instantly, our boy slips away, surprising everyone watching. The crowd wonders what just happened, and if he somehow dashed backward. The Count himself asks the Patriarch if he saw that, pointing out the boy is already acting scared before the fight even begins. He wonders if the brat will even endure the duel. Back in the arena, the giant, Randall, says Klein already looks terrified. Our protagonist denies it. Internally, he admits he was caught off guard, as that shoulder tap reminded him of the last time that damn priest grabbed him, which was definitely terrifying. Watching the fight from afar is Leia Rainfall-Wyvern. Beside her, a knight comments that her mother will be furious if she finds out, suggesting they head back. Leia replies that she doesn't care, since that woman isn't her real mother anyway. In her thoughts, she considers that if Klein beats that knight, she will give him a kiss. Obviously, she doesn't say this out loud. What she tells her escort is that she is also there to confirm a suspicion. Down in the arena, our boy warns Randall that his neck has been very stiff lately, so he shouldn't touch his shoulder. The giant couldn't care less and taps his shoulder again. Furious, Klein calls him a damn pervert, reminds him he told him not to touch him, and asks if his ears are stuffed with muscles too. On second thought, Klein taunts, that is exactly why the Empire abandoned him. This leaves Randall infuriated. He snaps back that this is excellent, and the more foul-mouthed the boy is, the more he will have to scream in pain later. Randall prepares to crush him all at once. Meanwhile, Klein unbuttons his coat. The punch comes flying in, aiming to crush the boy entirely. But when the giant realizes it, the only thing he is holding is Klein's coat. The crowd starts whispering that the boy was smashed into the ground, wondering what kind of monstrous power that was. Apparently, Lord Klein simply vanished. When everyone finally notices, our protagonist is on the other side of the arena, his sword already drawn. Klein thinks to himself that the bastard has a terrible temper. He knows a direct confrontation will be extremely difficult. If he takes a single hit from that massive body, he's the one who will be blown to pieces. He hates to admit it, but this isn't a situation where he can relax. In the stands, the knight apprentices watch the fight, noting that Klein dodged very well, but wondering how he could ever beat a monster like that. Even a glancing blow would shatter his bones, so he is seemingly just walking to his death. This leaves his brother Delane deeply worried. Delane recalls what his brother said days ago. Stepping into fight would give their enemies a legal excuse to kill the Rhineland heir. He acknowledges Klein is right. The family's fate is at stake, so he can't just interfere and do as he pleases. However, watching something like this isn't what he wants at all. Finally, the duel heats up as the two clash. Our boy aims straight for the giant's neck, but Randall manages to grab Klein's sword and throw him away. Stabbing his sword into the ground, our boy stops the impact. Randall declares the fight is over, but seeing the strike was blocked, he asks if Klein really thinks he can win just by dodging and blocking like that. He taunts him, asking why the boy doesn't try using his necromancy, since he is the great Archimond. Once again, they angered the wrong person. Randall faces a much calmer Klein than before. The protagonist glares back with a terrifying expression, a demonic aura exuding from his body. He mutters that this is highly annoying and wonders out loud if he should just use necromancy to kill them all right then and there. This instantly terrifies the giant, making him take a few steps back. The crowd is utterly confused, wondering what just happened to Randall, as there was no way he'd want to go easy on his opponent. Inside the psychopath's mind, he wonders what that was. There was definitely nothing there, but that strange feeling and sinister aura completely shook him. Count Delkin is confused, demanding to know what is going on and why his champion is acting like that. Meanwhile, the protagonist's father watches the fight in surprise. Back in the fight, Klein tells him not to worry, as he won't use necromancy. As a Rhineland, he knows this is a place to prove one's worth entirely with the sword, therefore he won't use magic. This declaration greatly surprises his father and the entire crowd, obviously making the Count nervous. Randall convinces himself it must have been a mere coincidence. He is leagues above Klein in both stamina and physical strength. Besides, that brat has no mana, making it impossible for him to win. The strength of Imperial swordsmanship lies in not holding back mana and pushing every sense to its absolute limit. Breathing, muscles, blood flow. With this one can hunt the opponent with a single burst of power. Randall charges forward, ordering the damn Rhineland to die. Our boy manages to dodge the strike at the very last second while observing Randall's sword. Klein realizes he can see the enemy's technique, his mana capacity, and even the arc the blade makes. He can clearly see every single detail of the technique. This pisses the brute off even more. He calls Klein a damn fly and tells him to die right now, attacking with monstrous power. Amidst the explosion and smoke from the impact, Randall realizes the boy has vanished again. He is bewildered, wondering if Klein actually read every trajectory of his sword in such a short time, which would be completely absurd. Little did he know the protagonist was right behind him. Klein points out that with such a massive body, his back is left wide open. He then activates the meteor sword, delivering a massive slash across Randall's back. The crowd goes into shock, instantly recognizing the technique. Even Klein's father and brother are stunned. In the arena, Randall starts screaming in pain. He can't understand how this is possible since the boy has zero mana. How the hell did he do that? Up in the stands, the knight next to Leia calls her captain, asking if she saw the same thing he did. Watching the fight, Leia gets slightly excited by the boy's movements and apparently a bit flushed, because by the looks of it, her lips already have an owner. During the fight, the Patriarch recalls his conversation with the captain the day before. The captain had said that normally the Patriarch himself would have intervened. Henkel replied that he knows very well he shouldn't act on personal feelings. He explained that if he stepped forward, the Rhineland family's prestige would fall even further. The opponent is an Imperial knight and Klein has absolutely no chance of winning. To the Patriarch's surprise, Dunkel asked why he allowed the duel then. Klein's father revealed the boy volunteered to defend his late mother's honor. Even when Klein was easily labeled as Archimond and locked in the monastery, his father couldn't save him. He questioned what right he had to stop him now, since in the end he failed to protect anything, not his son, not his family. Captain Dunkel, however, told him not to worry. He guaranteed young Master Klein is stronger than he thinks and would not lose the fight under any circumstances. Back in the arena, our protagonist attacks Randall again. Watching the scene, Henkel stands completely frozen in shock. Our boy begins to address the crowd. He explains that the northern swordsman family, the Rhinelands, reduces mana consumption to the absolute minimum to endure the brutal ice fields. If imperial swordsmanship is predation, crushing the opponent by releasing all mana at once, Rhineland swordsmanship is temperance. The essence of their technique is to attack the opponent's opening with the bare minimum of mana. Klein states that the ultimate swordsmanship extracts maximum efficiency with minimum mana. That is exactly how he, someone with 0 mana, can still use his family's techniques. He claims he might lack raw power, but his technique is more than enough to defeat a guy like Randall. This infuriates Randall, who calls Klein a lowly bastard for daring to face him head-on. Randall unleashes all his power at once, instantly terrifying the audience. Count Conwell is thrilled, thinking this is Randall's secret technique, a mana explosion that instantly seals the opponent's movements. Randall acts like a fierce lion staring down its prey. He screams that Klein is nothing but a moron, and that in the end he will be the victor. He charges at Klein with everything he has, intending to cleave him in two. Watching in deep concern, his brother yells at him to watch out. Instantly, our protagonist blocks the strike. He remembers Dunkel's warning to be careful with the sword he requested. Dunkel had warned that when the weapon clashed with a mana-imbued sword, it would shatter, and that is exactly what happens. Watching the blade break, the brute Randall gets very excited. He yells, "Serves you right" at Klein, and declares this is his end. Little did he know this had all been meticulously planned. Using the shattered sword, our boy dodges the strike and lunges at him. Klein declares this is it, and that the weapon to hunt him is finally complete. The scene looks like a simple feather floating calmly toward a great lion, but in the end, the great lion was actually the prey of a giant eagle, and just like that, using only his shattered sword, Klein severs the great Randall's arm. Up in the stands, the patriarch declares that's enough and the duel is over. An extremely awkward silence consumes everyone. Captain Dunkel thinks everything happened exactly as the young master said. Rhineland swordsmanship can be executed with minimal mana, but doing so is only possible for a highly experienced knight. Yet Klein executed it all flawlessly, from his footwork to the sword's trajectory. Furthermore, deliberately baiting his own sword to break just so he could strike at point-blank range is truly hard to believe. Dunkel concludes that no matter how you look at it, this is a perfect victory for young Master Klein. The only voice echoing in the arena belongs to Randall, screaming and crying over his lost hand. Soon after, the medical team rushes in, stating they must stop the bleeding quickly. Our boy watches them from behind and asks if they plan on reattaching his arm. The doctor says no, explaining the wound only needs basic healing magic, and they will prep a mold for a prosthetic arm next. Klein asks if they are serious and if that's really it, noting that apparently, even after 200 years, healing magic hasn't advanced at all. The patriarch approaches him and asks if he feels nothing, even after seeing a severed arm right in front of him. Our boy thinks he has a point. Since he isn't Archimon anymore, he should probably show some human reaction, but standing right behind them is Count Conwell, completely in shock. He mutters that this makes no sense and refuses to accept Randall loss like that. The Count asks if the patriarch knows how much money he spent to hire that night. The patriarch glares firmly at Count Conwell, stating that as agreed he must admit his faults and meet the winner's demands. Obviously he refuses, arguing he lost his son and his exclusive knight, questioning how he could ever accept this. But at that very moment he feels as if his head were ripped off just by Klein's freezing glare. Klein calls him by his name, Delkin Conwell, making the Count fall to his knees in terror, staring at our protagonist in absolute dread. Klein slowly approaches him and the trembling, confused Count asks what is happening. The old man vividly remembers feeling as if his neck had been sliced, or at least he thought it had. As the winner of this duel, our boy orders him to confess his sins before the Master of the North. He commands Delkin to kneel and beg for forgiveness, bow his damn head and plead for mercy, otherwise he will be crushed under the weight of his sins and regret it for all eternity. Consciously Klein uses an evil skill that seeps into Conwell's very being. The Count begins to feel a Death Lord standing right behind him, aiming at his back ready to drag him into something far worse than death itself. With his teeth chattering in fear, he confesses to everyone that he was wrong and bows before Klein. He admits that he and his son dared to try and harm young Master Klein. Watching the man's terror, our protagonist recalls that this was originally a voice used to summon the souls of the dead, the voice of the deceased. It is a soul-disrupting technique, exclusive to necromancers that induces extreme terror in the living. In front of the entire arena, Delkin Conwell slams his head on the ground, repeating over and over that he is so sorry. Furthermore, he confesses he insulted the young master's mother, the great Grand Duchess Claire, and begs for forgiveness for it. Klein thinks that with the magic being chanted right in his face, it makes total sense the Count would lose his mind. The crowd wonders what is going on, and how the pillar of a branch family could crumble so suddenly. For Klein, this is excellent. He believes this is a great start to his plans. He asks everyone to listen very closely to what he has to say. He introduces himself as the challenger of the trial by combat and its rightful winner. He declares he is the son of Grand Duchess Claire and the second son of the strongest knight in the north, Duke Henkel, stating his name is Klein Rhineland. Meanwhile, inside a certain temple, Garrison forcefully throws a door open. He glares at an old priest from afar, who is currently praying for the light to watch over those who go where it cannot reach, even if the path is dangerous and painful. Approaching the old man, Garrison calls him Cardinal Morlock. Morlock recognizes Garrison's voice, notes it sounds grim, and asks what the problem is. Garrison reports their surveillance target was attacked by a necromancer and is undead, and he needed to look into it. Cardinal Morlock replies there is no need to worry, as everything is part of the plan. He reveals the attack was orchestrated in cooperation with the Empire, intentionally using the necromancer. He explains that a necromancer is an entity that incites fear, and those terrified by their appearance will inevitably turn to God, causing countless people to flock to the Holy Order. The Cardinal turns to Garrison, telling him he should understand very well that if they can revive the Holy Order and spread God's will, a handful of sacrifices is a fair price. Instantly, Garrison grabs the Cardinal by the neck. He furiously asks why the hell a servant of the Holy Temple has fallen into petty political games and made deals with heretics. Completely shocked, Morlock asks what Garrison is doing, but before the old man can scream for help, Garrison crushes his head with his bare hands, exactly as he did to the necromancer in the forest. Right behind Garrison, another man appears and asks if he feels better now. The newcomer mocks that throughout all this time, Garrison hasn't changed a bit, finding it funny that he has already killed more clerics than necromancers. He comments that they really ought to find out what Garrison is hiding inside his guts. This long-haired man is the Archbishop of the Holy Order, Palamon L. Garrison glares at Palamon and asks if that ambush was his doing. Palamon immediately denies it, saying he merely authorized the operation. He explains that he actually brought new information regarding their surveillance target. When Garrison lunges at him with full force, Palamon easily dodges the strike. The Archbishop notes that whenever necromancy is used, it inevitably leaves a trace. He shows a cross containing those traces, stating it belongs to the necromancer Garrison killed. Palamon explains the dead man's technique was a soul return art that raises corpses, something the Empire is actively researching. However, the other energy felt at the scene was a technique resembling the original form of necromancy, one that manipulates souls instead of corpses. Garrison asks what he means by the original form of necromancy. Palamon confirms it, meaning there were two necromancers at the scene. He then tells Garrison to listen very closely to his conclusion. The true identity of their surveillance target, the second son of the Rhineland family, is that of a necromancer. The scene cuts to another location. On a rainy night inside a mine, an old miner was working peacefully. What he didn't know was that a gigantic monster had been targeting him from the start. Even his desperate screams for help couldn't be heard by anyone. Back at the Duke's mansion, the innocent little maid Erin, holding a cookie, jokes that the situation is a disaster. She ends up making a doll with the young master's face, thinking it looks exactly like him, and bursts into laughter. Meanwhile, our boy sitting in his chair reflects that a week has passed since the trial by combat. He defeated the champion Randall using his family's technique, successfully extracted Count Conwell's confession with the voice of the deceased, and publicly announced his existence to the Branch family faction. Klein thought he would finally be recognized by everyone. The real problem is that his 15-year-old body lacks the stamina to keep up the pace. Annoyed, he tells Erin that if she is done playing, she can head to her room and sleep. Pouting, she calls him mean, complaining she always plays alone. Our boy asks what she means by playing, pointing out he is clearly reading. She shoots back that it's just a romance novel, so basically he's just playing too. Little does she know, while the cover looks like an ordinary romance novel, the inside is filled with Klein's secret notes. They are detailed writings on anatomy, magic circuits, and spell formations, all focused on the infamous necromancy. He calculates that with his current body, he can summon a maximum of 11 skeletons. Klein knows his control is stable, but he lacks the numbers for a war of attrition, forcing him to research further. His biggest problem, however, is that damned priest, Garrison. The man seemed ready to exterminate the very last seed of any necromancer. Since Garrison already suspects him, Klein must somehow recover his original power before the priest comes looking for him. The challenge is doing it without getting caught. Fortunately, his answer arrives the next day when his father summons him. Duke Henkel informs him they received reports of a sighting in the mines, with creatures commonly referred to as the undead. Instantly, our protagonist offers to go, knowing real combat is the best form of research. His father warns him of the high casualty reports and asks if he will be alright. Our boy guarantees it won't be a problem. Klein figures that after the trial by combat, even Henkel acknowledges him now. Furthermore, if the monsters are undead, they must be related to the mercenaries who attacked him earlier. This is the perfect opportunity to use necromancy as much as he wants, completely unseen. Little did he know he would later gain a companion, Captain Dunkel. Dunkel explains the Duke ordered him to tag along to ensure the young master's safety. Breaking the ice, the captain comments that the night sky looks incredible during missions. Our boy simply hands him a roasted skewer and tells him to eat. Dunkel thanks him, awkwardly confessing that he should actually be the one doing the work. Klein shoots back, asking if Dunkel didn't see the lump of coal he just made trying to cook, bluntly stating the captain's only job is to stand there and watch. During this mission, Klein learned a completely unexpected fact. The supposed knight commander is utterly useless at hunting and cooking. Embarrassed, the captain admits he can't even look him in the eye and doesn't know what to say. Our boy just tells him to forget it and eat what he's grilling. Unlike Dunkel, Klein spent over a decade running from the Night Order in his past life, so surviving in the wild is nothing for someone who has endured far worse. Watching the young master, the captain notes he is very different from other boys his age. He had his sword talent and displayed a formidable spirit during the trial by combat. Because of this, Dunkel confesses he sometimes thinks Klein might actually be the reincarnation of Archimonde. Instantly Klein orders Dunkel never to say something like that in front of that damn priest. Dunkel laughs, assuring him he would never say it out loud, since Archimonde was a demon who turned tens of millions of northerners into undead. Suddenly the mood shifts and a grim wind blows past them. The captain notices the change in the air and our boy firmly repeats that he must never ever bring that subject up again, slightly scaring Dunkel. Mid-conversation, they hear a noise coming from the nearby village. Their desperate villagers are fleeing from a horde of zombies. These monsters are easily put down by Dunkel and young Master Klein, who quickly orders the captain to save the rest of the people. Once the creatures are defeated, a villager thanks them for the help and asks who they are. The captain introduces him as the second young master of the Rhineland family. The villager is shocked to hear the name Rhineland, but the captain cuts him off, stating the priority is knowing how long these things have been appearing. Meanwhile, Klein observes the undead. He deduces this is a form of reanimation magic used to revive and control corpses, and just as expected, it's the exact same technique used by the necromancer who attacked him in the forest. Back in the conversation with Dunkel, the villager reveals the attack started about 2 months ago, right after the Count's family restricted access to the mine, and that several people began disappearing around that time too. Furthermore, the villager reveals those undead are all former residents of their village. This infuriates our protagonist, who demands to know what he means. Right then another villager aggressively charges at Klein. He grabs him asking if he is a Rhineland and demanding an immediate answer. Confused, Dunkel steps in asking what the man thinks he's doing to the young master and ordering him to let go immediately. In sheer desperation, the villager screams that they begged for help for 2 whole months and received absolutely no response from the main family. Now only 2 of them show up just to ask how long this has been going on. Sobbing, he reveals that the monster Klein just killed was his own father. The poor man only worked day and night in the mine and ended up turned into that. The villager cries out asking why they have to suffer so much. Amidst the argument, Klein's patience runs out again, something apparently getting easier and easier to trigger. With a manic glare, he stares at the citizen and tells him he talks too much. Klein tells the man to shut his mouth, asking why the hell any of this is his fault. His coldness shocks the villager. The boy continues stating he wasn't the one who turned the man's father and the others into undead. If he wants to vent his anger, he should pick the right target. Noticing the young master is furious, Dunkel steps in, offering to handle the situation to calm things down. To everyone's surprise, our protagonist activates his power and begins a chant. He commands the innocent spirits who died in suffering, promising to light the lantern that will guide their way. Soon the villagers realize the undead bodies are moving again. Klein Rhineland declares he will uphold their will and they must follow his guidance. Suddenly, the the spirits of the dead begin levitating toward the sky. The mystical sight astonishes everyone present. The spirits silently communicate with our boy, who listens, looks at them, and says he understands. Amazed, Dunkel asks what that is, wondering if it's soul resonance, a technique said to have been used 200 years ago during the Northern Plague to free the dead. That same desperate villager stares at his father's spirit, who in his final moments simply smiles, bidding his son a final farewell. Soon after, everything falls silent again. Walking entirely alone toward the mine, Klein recalls the villager's instructions to head straight in that direction to find the entrance. As they walk, Dunkel asks the young master what he discussed with the spirits. Our boy brushes it off, saying it was nothing major, just that the spirits thanked him for helping them rest in peace and begged him to avenge them. Hearing about revenge, Dunkel freezes. The captain remembers what he said hours ago about the boy seeming like Archimonde's reincarnation, vividly recalling Klein's terrifying expression as he ordered him never to say that again. After some thought, Dunkel draws his sword and asks permission to ask a question. Pointing the blade at the master he serves, Dunkel asks directly, "Who exactly are you?" Right after this, the scene flashes back a few years to when the knight asked if that boy was Lord Klein Rhineland. He thought of the young master who, after being locked up in the monastery for 7 years, returned to the estate, the cursed young master who called himself Archimonde. What was even more surprising was his pitch-black gaze so close to the void. It was hard to believe such a look belonged to such a small child. It all started that day when they found a dead cat in the estate's kitchen, then a second dead cat in the back garden, a third the next day, a fourth, a fifth, and a sixth. In total, 7 cats were found dead. Thus, the rumors began. People said the boy had an affinity for necromancy since birth, claiming his mother's family was the same. The servants wondered if he truly was Archimonde. Apparently, the rumors were true, and it was indeed a cursed bloodline. Dunkel, like everyone else, also suspected this. Unlike the unsettling atmosphere hanging over the estate, the young master just stared out the window since the day he returned, completely uninterested in the rumors around him. Even though everyone suspected him of being Archimonde, Dunkel thought he was too young and probably had nothing to do with the cat incident. One early morning, the knight found the young master walking across the estate. He was completely alone, heading in a specific direction. Confused, Dunkel wondered where the boy was going at that hour and decided to follow him. Finding his path highly unusual, they eventually arrived at the family cemetery. Dunkel wondered what Klein was doing there. Unable to see clearly because of the tombstones, he considered moving closer to check. When he finally approached, he found the young master standing next to all the dead cats. Confused, the knight asked what was going on. Our boy replied that he was going to perform a funeral ritual for them. Still confused, Dunkel asked what kind of funeral ritual this was. Klein explained that judging by the lesions, it was an infectious disease. It was harmless to humans but fatal to animals. If the bodies were left alone, the disease would spread further, and other beasts might dig them up as well. The knight warned that handling them with bare hands could get him hurt, suggesting they call someone else. Klein simply replied it was fine, as someone had to do it anyway. Back in the present, the captain recalls those words, "A job someone has to do." Dead serious, he asks again, "Who are you?" However, Klein stops him and asks a question first, wondering if he remembers Berkel Rhineland's first saying. Dunkel replies that one's actions, not their roots, define who they are. Our boy confirms he is absolutely correct. That was the reason Dunkel, a poor commoner, was able to become the knight captain. That is also the reason he, the son of a foreign mother, is still alive today. It is precisely because of that. Klein notes that since leaving the monastery, the person who spent the most time with him was Dunkel himself. He then tells the captain to decide. If he truly believes Klein is Archimonde, he can kill him right now. Dunkel thinks it over, lowers his sword, and says he hasn't decided yet, as he certainly isn't convinced. However, the one he serves is the second young master of the Rhinelands, Klein, not some continent-destroying demon. Our boy stares at him quite surprised and replies that he understands, thanking him for the compliment. Walking deep inside the mines, they find themselves surrounded by several corpses. Dunkel comments that even this place smells like death. Klein agrees. To make matters worse, the corpses start moving, and they face several undead right in front of them. The captain notes he can see 7, but there must be more further inside. Klein turns and starts casting his magic, declaring he summons them and they must answer his call. He grants them flesh to crush their enemies. Several skeletal beings appear before him, greatly surprising Dunkel when he turns around. Klein orders them to advance, and his undead soldiers attack the other zombie-like undead. It basically turns into a massacre. Watching from behind, Dunkel mutters that this makes no sense, wondering how skeletons with such appearance and agility can exist. Klein casually mentions that Dalton's mercenaries said the exact same thing, asking if it's really that fascinating. The two keep walking deeper into the cave, escorted by Klein's skeletons. Eventually they stop after hearing a noise from deep within. Judging by the sound, Dunkel estimates there are about 40 of them, putting them at a severe numerical disadvantage. However, Klein turns again and unleashes his necromancy, declaring he releases the bindings wrapping their bodies and ordering them to free their agonizing souls to obey his command. With this, the enemy zombies transform into souls under his control. Our boy explains he is converting the subjugated undead into allies, his basic tactic when necromancers fight each other. He concludes this should be enough for the upcoming battle. Now with even more skeletons, they advance toward the sound. Klein orders the vanguard to push forward, and he and Dunkel follow right behind. They finally clash with the zombies who are easily obliterated by the vanguard. Klein orders the rearguard skeletons to support the attack and keep pushing relentlessly. The summons execute his commands flawlessly. Walking beside Klein, Dunkel thinks it's incredibly hard to believe what he's seeing, even watching it live. He knows skeletons are considered low-tier summons among the undead, but he can't understand how they move like that, exactly like a real army following its commander's orders. After the battle with all the zombies wiped out, Dunkel calculates they annihilated a force 4 times their size and wonders what the hell all of this is. Beside him, Klein states that from here on out, it will just be the two of them. He reminds Dunkel of his promise to believe in him, meaning the captain must see this through to the end. Reaching even deeper into the mine, Dunkel finally stops and notes that the further they go, the weirder the situation gets. As he speaks, a few drops of blood fall on his face. He wonders what that is and then hears a human voice. He calls out, asking if anyone is alive up there and assuring them they came to hell. But when he finally gets a good look at the cave ceiling, he is terrified. Countless bodies are tied up and suspended by ropes. Horrified, Dunkel asks what the hell this is. Klein takes a look and deduces that the missing villagers were kidnapped and used as tools for reanimation magic. While they talk, someone appears right behind them. The person says that, as expected, he really knows his stuff. The tall woman, dressed in very peculiar clothes, explains that reanimation magic is a spell that revives corpses and turns them into the summoner's familiars. That is why it requires a massive amount of high-quality bodies. Basic knowledge among them, the necromancers. Our boy glares at her and asks who she is. The woman replies she never thought she would find him in a place like this. She greets him saying, "It's been a while, demon of the continent, Lord Archimonde." This leaves our boy in absolute shock, wondering if she actually recognized him. It is explained that the word necromancer derives from corpse, necros, and divination mantea, referring to those who summon souls to obtain oracles. However, after that day they became a symbol of absolute dread and represented the great calamity in which tens of millions of undead invaded the continent, the Archimonde incident. This immense, unprecedented army, which neither ate nor rested, and completely ignored conventional war tactics, utterly devastated the continent. The conflict only came to an end when the hero Berkel Rhineland defeated their master, Archimonde. After that, those fascinated by this power began studying necromancy one after another, but the practice eventually became limited strictly to reanimation magic. In the end, today's necromancers have been reduced to mere second-rate mages who only know how to raise corpses to fight, just like the girl standing right in front of them now. Once again, the girl taunts him. "It's been a while, Lord Archimonde." She reveals her name is Pale, and she is a necromancer. Our highly confused boy asks what she is talking about. Dunkel right beside him asks what she means by Archimonde, but quickly focuses on the pressing matter and asks what that energy is. Our boy agrees, noting it is an impressive amount of mana. Klein realizes she channeled magic into her own cloak, knowing witches like her are the only ones capable of fusing mana into malleable materials. At that moment, Dunkel steps forward, declaring he is young Master Klein, and ordering her not to dare call him by the name of trash like Archimonde. Our boy is highly irritated by this turn of events, but Pale just laughs saying she was only joking and thinks she was too rude to the Renlin young master. She claims to know the rumors about him, and after feeling that unknown demonic energy earlier, she is certain he is a necromancer just like her. But, how should she put it? Seeing a necromancer use a sword is simply pathetic. Dunkel tells her to stop spouting nonsense and answer what she did to those people and who sent her. Pale ignores him, stating that a true necromancer does not rely on mere tools. They command souls and control death itself. With that, black energy spills from her mouth and drifts toward the dead villagers, who are still groaning in pain and mumbling strange things. Finally, Pale declares they will show him the real meaning of true necromancy. From inside a black hole, a gigantic arm made of human flesh emerges. She calls it her masterpiece, the one she dedicated her entire life to. A gigantic monster, a hideously powerful cyclops, appears right next to the girl. Dunkel is in shock, muttering that this is madness and he has never seen anything like it, not even on the battlefields. Pale affectionately calls it her little baby, and apologizes, saying it must have been really hard to hold back its killing intent in there. She asks it for a favor, crush those two until they turn to dust. The monster turns and charges at Dunkel and Klein. The captain realizes the creature is incredibly fast, despite its massive size, and tries to push Klein away to save him. However, contrary to his expectations, our boy is the one who pushes Dunkel away. Klein takes a direct hit from the giant monster and is sent flying into the wall. Although injured, he is clearly not dead and simply glares at the beast with sheer anger. When the monster is about to stomp on him, Dunkel appears, ordering the creature not to dare lay a finger on his young master, and slices the Cyclops' entire leg off. The strike surprises both our protagonist and Pale. The monster starts screaming in pain with its leg torn off. Dunkel glares deadly serious at Pale. The Necromancer praises him, saying it was a nice strike for a mere knight, but talent of that level won't even scratch her masterpiece. The monster starts regenerating right in front of them, leaving Dunkel in shock as he watches its leg grow back. The creature attacks again, but the knight thinks to himself it doesn't matter. The young master threw himself to save him, even without a single drop of mana in his body. He did that for him. Dunkel feels guilty for ever daring to suspect he might be Archimonde. To redeem that shame, he resolves to kill the monster right then and there, risking his own life to protect the young master. He starts slashing the Cyclops relentlessly, as if there were no tomorrow, but the creature easily regenerates from every strike, leaving Dunkel increasingly frustrated. Even landing clean hits, he fails to wound it deeply. With a few leaps, the captain jumps up the monster's body, aiming for its head, but right as he is about to strike, the Cyclops proves faster. The monster delivers a violent slap, swatting Dunkel to the other side of the cave, where he falls unconscious. Pale gets extremely excited, saying this exceeds everything she had imagined. She is deeply in awe, driven by an endless obsession with necromancy, and after countless experiments, her knowledge had surpassed the singularity. She had finally managed to create her own variant, something unreachable for anyone else, which is why she was absolutely certain this was innate talent. Like a lunatic, she starts screaming that not even Archimonde himself would be capable of creating something like this. She convinces herself she has pure talent and has surpassed Archimonde's knowledge. The monster flashes a strange smile, if that could even be called a face, and grabs Dunkel, ready to devour him. But at that exact moment, Klein reappears. He starts explaining that the core connection point is the first key to synthesizing a Cyclops, and the second is the core suture. Pale glares at him suspiciously. Klein continues, stating the core is the conduit sending the formulas that make severed flesh regrow, and it's also the source of its regenerative power. So, how do you kill this thing? Attacking the body like Dunkel did is a pure waste of time. You just have to destroy the core. And where exactly is it? The boy explains a Cyclops' core isn't fixed in one place. It's a vital point that constantly moves throughout the body, just like blood flowing through veins. Pale sneers, acting superior, and says it's impossible to find it because it never stops moving. She asks if Klein didn't hear her. That is her masterpiece, the one she dedicated her whole life to, and faced with her talent, he is nothing. Highly arrogant, she orders the monster to crush Klein. Right as the great Cyclops is about to strike, our boy questions, talent? He finally remembers his past life, the memories of slicing and destroying hundreds and thousands of Cyclopes. He didn't need to put into words a sensation that remained as vivid as if it had happened yesterday, the sensation of knowing every single pathway of those creatures' internal cores. He tells her that in the past, he simply did it like this. In a single motion, Klein not only slices off the monster's head, but also hits the core dead on. Pale is completely in shock. With one measly strike, he destroyed not just the creature, but also her ego and what she so proudly called talent. As the core shatters, a bewildered Pale asks what that was. Our boy just stares at her and says that if she dedicated her entire life to creating that, maybe she should leave it as a mere hobby in her next life. Because in the end, she didn't have that much talent after all. It is often said that death is like falling asleep, just as a body overwhelmed by fatigue is freed from the weight of daily life. Perhaps a body overwhelmed by life is also freed from its karma. But for Pale, things are completely ruined. She finally opens her eyes and finds herself in a completely unknown place. She wonders where she is and why there are several coffins floating right above her head. Highly anxious, she stands up and asks if anyone is there. Finally, someone appears. Noting that she has woken up, he explains that this is the place beyond the world where souls arrive, what he calls the afterlife. Pale glares at the being, demanding to know what he means by afterlife, telling him to stop spouting nonsense and get her out of there. However, our protagonist appears right above her, revealing himself to be the Lord of Death, the master who commands the dead. He warns her that if she wants to leave so badly, it means she hasn't grasped her true situation yet. He suggests they start the judgment for her sins immediately, leaving Pale even more tense. He reveals his name is Archimonde. This fills her with dread. More than fearing the judgment, she panics simply because he called himself Archimonde. Pale knows that name very well. In necromancy textbooks, he is a recorded historical disaster, the monarch who raised an unprecedented army of death, the so-called demon of the continent. He is the beginning and the end of all necromancy, the one who commanded tens of millions of undead, the great king of necromancers. This very king, the revered Lord Archimonde, orders her to step forward, terrifying her even more. He repeats the command to Necromancer Pale, terrified she doesn't want to step closer, but finds it bizarre that her body starts moving on its own, as if following his exact commands. Our boy begins his judgment. He declares she turned innocent people into test subjects, kidnapped and tortured them to use as tools, keeping them trapped so they couldn't die, all to satisfy her own selfish desires. Panicking, she screams that this can't be true and asks if Archimonde hasn't been dead for 200 years. Right then, she notices something strange on her hands, wondering what that liquid is. She looks up and stares at the coffin hovering right above her. Archimonde continues his speech, stating she used the dead as tools, so from now on she will become his tool. The coffin, created specifically for her, opens and Pale begins levitating toward it. She begs him to wait at least a minute and stop, wondering how the hell she would become his tool. She vehemently refuses, screaming it's impossible and begging him not to do it. The coffin slams shut. Our boy asks if by any chance she is afraid to die. If so, she can rest easy, because they will meet again very soon. With his scythe, he slices the coffin in half, finally killing Pale while she cries in terror, begging him to end her suffering quickly. Back in reality, Pale opens her eyes again and wonders if she is still in the mine. She concludes it was all just a dream and that she didn't actually die. However, right in front of her is Dunkel, completely paralyzed and muttering that this is unbelievable. He can't believe only her head actually survived. Utterly confused, Pale stares at the two of them and starts screaming. Dunkel wonders what the hell that is. Our boy simply observes the situation. Dunkel remembers losing consciousness for a moment and wonders what the hell happened while he was out, and if the young master really did all that by himself. Pale demands to know what is going on. Klein declares that they can start now, and Dunkel agrees. The necromancer asks what he is doing and why she is like this. Our boy just asks how she feels, and if she is finally coming to her senses. She glares at him, extremely tense and silent. Klein notes that by now she must have realized her situation. It finally clicks and Pale notices Klein's voice sounds different. She recognizes Archimonde's voice and remembers the promise that they would meet again. She realizes it wasn't a dream and that the rumors about Klein Rhineland being Lord Archimonde were true. She tries to say his name but Klein tells her to shut her mouth and stay quiet because he needs information. He demands to know who sent her to the north, how many of them there are, where they were sent, and why. He warns her she must spill everything. If she cooperates, she gets a painless death, but if she refuses, he will grant her eternal life. This terrifies her and she asks what he means by eternal life. He confirms she will live forever in that exact state, just as ahead, and challenges her, saying he wants to see how much longer she can endure without shedding a single tear. A few hours pass and they gather plenty of information. Dunkel calmly writes it all down, noting he recorded every single word. Our boy asks if they're done and decides it's time to leave, as he is sick of this mine. The girl asks him to wait, wondering what he is going to do with her, reminding him she answered everything exactly as ordered. With a smile, our boy confirms he indeed promised to kill her, crying tears of joy over finally being able to die. Pale thanks the heavens. She knows she is definitely going to hell, but figures death will at least bring her relief. Klein tells her not to worry as he always keeps his promises. He starts casting his magic and asks her to hold on for about a week. Instantly, Pale feels the strange movement of tiny legs. When she realizes it, it's cockroaches. Klein tells her the insects will take very good care of her until she dies, as they will be the executioners of her sentence. Sheer panic takes over Pale's head, and she desperately begs him not to do this, screaming to keep the bugs away and that she doesn't want such a painful end. Our boy brushes it off like it's nothing, merely thanking Pale for becoming his tool. Driven completely mad, she starts calling him Archimond, screaming that he is a cursed absolute monster. The next day, back at the Rhineland estate, Duke Henkel reads the report. The document states the Empire released necromancers in the north, and the Holy Order turned a blind eye to it. He asks Klein if this is true. Our boy confirms it, saying the situation is exactly as written. He explains the undead in the mine, including the test subjects totaled around 150, and nearly 30 people vanished just in the village they visited. This means the crisis must be even worse elsewhere. Furthermore, since the nobles are too busy with power struggles, they aren't even aware of the problem. The Duke summons his butler, Berkman, and orders him to dispatch the night order to the locations Klein mentioned. Berkman agrees and asks if he should request reinforcements at the border as well. The Duke tells him to send a letter, noting that acting is better than doing nothing. He turns his attention back to his son, praising him for doing something great. The boy deflects, saying it was just a stroke of luck and that he would have died out there if not for Dunkel. Internally, Klein knows the situation has grown complicated, so they decided to keep the necromancy a secret for now, assuming Dunkel keeps his mouth shut. His father opens a drawer and tells his son to take the item inside. Henkel reveals he originally intended to give him a few missions, but it seems that's no longer necessary. He hands him the crest of a Rhineland knight, officially appointing Klein as an apprentice knight. Henkel acknowledges that given the boy's achievements, this might not be enough. Our boy thanks him, stating it is more than enough. His father looks at him with serious confidence, telling him he must be exhausted from the fight and the journey, and tells him to go rest. Klein bows and takes his leave. Right after Klein exits, Berkman comments to the Duke that it's shocking, to say the least, that they dealt with over 70 ordinary undead, a giant, and an armed necromancer in a closed space. Even factoring in Captain Dunkel's combat power, the Duke orders the butler to send a letter to his brother. Berkman is confused, and Henkel explains he knows his brother doesn't show up for just any reason. He instructs the butler to write the following message: "The genius you've been looking for your whole life is right here at the Rhineland estate." He was referring to Klein. On the other side of the estate, our boy walks through the night quarters, reflecting on his new status as an apprentice. Unlike the main estate where strangers can come and go freely, the night barracks are a confidential military zone. He figures even someone like Garrison couldn't enter without permission. Klein knows the bastard still suspects him, and is probably itching to perform a purification ritual on him by now. He celebrates the fact that he'll never have to see him again. He reaffirms the decision he made the day he killed Dalton, to restore the Rhineland family's former glory. With his new apprentice title, the next step will be easy. Before he can think of anything else, his maid Erin appears and hugs him tightly, shouting for young Master Klein. Confused, and feeling like the girl almost snapped his seventh vertebra, he asks what she is doing there, teasingly asking if they ran out of cookies. In a very cute way, she asks if he really thinks cookies are the only thing she cares about. Klein sarcastically asks if they aren't, pointing out a crumb on the corner of her mouth. She plays it off saying she doesn't know what it is, and he just tells her to ask the cooks to make more. However, Erin reveals something else. Priest Garrison is here right now. The news deeply terrifies Klein. He turns around slowly as if seeing a ghost, flashing back to the scene of Garrison crushing the necromancer's head with a psychopathic glare. He finally realizes he is screwed and that this priest is a complete lunatic. Right behind him, Garrison asks if his mission went well, noting he had been waiting for him, young Master Klein Rainwan, because they have a few things to discuss. Right after this, the scene cuts to Klein's past. Several estate servants were looking for him, asking where he was. They gathered to check if there was any sign of young Master Klein. One of them notes he doesn't seem to be around, and another comments there's nothing on the other side either. A servant grumbles that the situation is terrible, as it's almost time for the purification ritual and he vanished out of nowhere. Little did they know, young Klein was hiding in a tree. He listened to the servant saying Priest Garrison would be furious, but would forgive him if he showed up now. Back then, Klein knew this was impossible. That lunatic bastard did the exact same thing last time before hanging him upside down. The nearby servants agree to return to the mansion. Meanwhile, our boy just mentally begs for them to get out of there as fast as possible. At night, Klein continues sleeping peacefully in the tree, but suddenly has a nightmare about Garrison, begging him to stop. Waking up and looking at the sky, he realizes it's nighttime and concludes he fell asleep. He mutters to himself that the search party must have given up by now, meaning it's time to head back. But as he climbs down the massive tree, he hears a terrifying noise. Looking closely, he sees several northern grizzly bears accompanied by 2 cubs. Our boy recalls that the grizzly bear is an apex predator native to the region, incredibly aggressive and prone to cruel hunting. Their claws are specifically built to shred and deb one meat. Without his necromancy, he would be nothing but a snack for the beasts, leaving him no choice but to wait until they leave. He starts grumbling that the damn northern weather sucks. He remembers the northerners who died so unjustly, now even reincarnated into the family of the hero who killed him. He is still living a life on the run. Klein reminisces about the past, when the three heroes hunted him down, comparing it to his second life where people call him a cursed child. Sadly, he mutters to himself that this place is too cold and falls asleep once again. He wakes up again, but this time on Garrison's back, being carried back to the mansion. Noticing the boy is awake, Garrison asks if he is alright. Dazed, our boy asks if he froze to death and if by any chance this is hell. Garrison laughs, replying of course not. He is simply taking him back after finding him unconscious in the tree. Klein points out there were grizzly bears around it, but the priest tells him not to worry as he already took care of the beasts. Our boy demands to be put down, stating he'd rather die than be carried by a lunatic like him, but the priest warns that Klein is burning with a fever and should just stay still for now. Confused, Klein asks why he saved him. If he had left him there he would have frozen or been eaten, and the boy thought Garrison wanted him dead more than anyone. This makes Garrison pause for a moment. He explains that a star does not create its own darkness, it simply shines where it is. A young life is the same, it still cannot distinguish right from wrong. He states he has no right to destroy a young being's potential and future. Klein ironically wonders if that was really something the priest should say to him after all the torment he put him through, but the priest continues warning him. However, if this being chooses to become darkness itself, in other words, if he is the true Archimand he has been looking for all this time, then the young master should be careful, because Garrison will kill him with his own bare hands. Back in the present, our boy faces Priest Garrison once again. The priest greets him saying it's been a while young master. Klein replies coldly that it has indeed been a long time, Garrison. The priest agrees, revealing he had to handle a few matters at the order. While there, an old friend gave him something very interesting. He shows Klein a cross-shaped capsule. Seeing the blood inside, our boy recognizes it as ectoplasm. Apparently the priest has been detecting his demonic energy as Klein knows that is an object meant to contain spiritual energy. Garrison continues, stating a necromancer appeared when Klein was attacked in the forest and that he personally took care of the bastard. But here is the issue. According to that device, there wasn't just the trace of a single necromancer. The object indicates there were two. Our boy notes Garrison's voice is calm as usual, but he can feel his own heart racing. After facing countless masters and monsters in the past, Archimand's intuition is screaming a warning of danger. Klein wonders if he can handle the priest with his current strength. If he uses his skill to copy techniques, he might stand a chance. However, to do that, he would have to survive seeing the technique first. Since he has only just started gaining combat experience in this body, beating a monster like Garrison is nearly impossible. He knows that not even in a million years could he defeat him with his current strength. Dead serious, Garrison orders Klein to use necromancy right here, right now. Confused, our boy asks what he means. The priest explains he is giving him a chance out of respect for their shared history. If what Klein uses is merely a soul return art to control corpses, Garrison will only report the incident to the order. But if it is the original form of necromancy that manipulates souls, the exact same formula used by the man the priest is thinking of, then the boy will not escape death. This surprises our boy, making him realize he is cornered. He begins remembering the voices of those ancient heroes ordering him to die. This fills him with deep indignation. Klein snaps, telling Garrison he is a bastard who did nothing but torture him with holy water under the guise of a purification ritual. However, he laughs, noting it's funny because someone he knew in the past also said something similar about the future of a young being. He mentions that back then he didn't understand what it meant, but when Garrison spoke those words he understood for a brief moment that this was the justice the priest believed in, and that his actions were not driven by personal hatred. In his thoughts, our boy admits that in the past he was the loser and died because of it, but this time he won't let history repeat itself. Klein asks Garrison if he really wants him to use necromancy here, and if he plans to kill him if he turns out to be Archimand. He declares playtime is over. From now on he will decide who he becomes, swearing to himself he will never run away again. This stance surprises Garrison more and more. The brute replies that in this case, he has no choice but to force him to use necromancy, preparing to strike. Our boy braces himself, sensing the imminent attack. Worried, he knows he must find a way to dodge quickly or he will die. He figures he only needs to dodge once. When the strike is inches from his eyes, Klein actually manages to evade it. This shocks Garrison, who wonders how the boy pulled that off. But during this movement the blood capsule falls to the ground. The surrounding crowd of servants starts screaming, wondering what is happening and why the priest is attacking the young master. Klein thinks that if he counterattacks while the priest is distracted he might have a chance, but to our boy's surprise, before he can even touch his weapon, Garrison appears in front of him, holding the blade and asking if this was what he was looking for. Klein finally realizes the priest disarmed him in a flash. The situation looks desperate. Garrison throws the sword away, commenting that it's highly bizarre for a necromancer to use a sword. Our protagonist understands the bastard truly plans to kill him right here. The priest states Klein doesn't need such a weapon, demanding once again that he use necromancy, and lunges for another attack. But unlike the first time, our boy just smiles, realizing the situation has changed. The attack misses Klein, and Garrison slams head-on into the mansion walls, completely shattering them and creating a massive crater. The impact shocks all the nearby servants. When the dust finally settles, Garrison realizes what happened. The people around them scream for the guards. Garrison glares at the figure and asks what he is doing here. Standing right in front of Klein is his own father. The 7th Duke of the Rhineland family demands the priest explain in detail what he wants, before his sword strikes him down. And this time, Duke Henkel Rhineland has indeed unleashed his murderous aura. In the background, our highly amused boy realizes everything is going exactly as expected. The knights finally appear and take their positions. They declare they must protect his grace, the Duke and young Master Klein. Looking at the knights, Klein thinks they are more sensitive to hostility and murderous intent than anyone else. If he could just buy a little time, not only Henkel but the Rhineland knights would come running. Since the opponent is none other than Agent Garrison, Duke Henkel steps forward and warns he will ask one last time. Garrison, why are you trying to attack Klein? Garrison replies that the young master used necromancy, and the Duke surely knows what that means. Henkel counters that there is no law anywhere on the continent, except in the Holy Kingdom, that forbids necromancy, but the furious priest says the Duke should know better than anyone what necromancy means for the young master. The father defends his son, stating he suffered for 7 years because of trivial rumors, and enough is enough. Furthermore, he is that child's father, and will never allow the agent to lay a finger on his son again. Henkel orders Garrison to withdraw his killing intent, unless he wants to make an enemy out of the Rhineland family. Hearing this, the priest bursts into laughter. He declares there is no shame in his faith, that he will not surrender his heart to the tongue of a non-believer, and swears before God to show no mercy to the heretic. Looking like a complete lunatic, he begins exuding an even greater murderous aura. This shocks everyone around. Even the knights grow worried, warning the Duke that Garrison is dangerous, and they shouldn't approach him recklessly. Watching from behind, even the Duke realizes the situation has grown extremely dangerous. Henkel shifts his stance and gets ready for combat. Their energies clash, and the Duke's mansion begins crumbling down on everyone's heads. Henkel warns him one last time, "Lower your fist, Agent." Garrison replies that this is God's judgment upon the Rhinelands. The two charge at each other as if they were truly going to fight to the death. To Henkel's surprise, his sword energy clashes with the priest, but Garrison punches right through it, tearing the Duke's power apart. Right after, the priest lunges at Henkel with his strongest attack, the condensation strike. Henkel glances at his son for a moment, noticing the boy is highly concerned. To counter, the Duke activates the Rhineland family's secret technique, the meteor sword, second form, preparing to go all out as well. The exact moment their powers are about to clash, Klein realizes things have gotten way too complicated and completely out of control. But at that very second, to everyone's surprise, Beren appears, screaming for them to stop. She throws herself right in the middle of them, shocking not only the combatants but also our boy, who wonders what the hell she is doing there. Dunkel runs up to Miss Aren, warning her it's dangerous, telling her to get out, and asking why the hell she is there. But Aren simply turns to Priest Garrison and shamelessly tells him he had promised to give her a present when he got back. She says this as if nothing is happening, leaving everyone perplexed. The priest blinks in confusion, asking, "What do you mean a present?" She confirms it, saying he definitely promised to buy her one. To make matters worse, she starts jumping up and down, telling him he should know that liars are punished by God. In the background, Klein realizes that being completely unable to read the room to this degree is actually a talent in itself. Disarmed by the girl's innocence, the priest gives in and says yes, that was it, a present. He hands her a package, saying they are the cookies he bought at the famous bakery on 3rd Street near the Royal Gate. Aren's attitude instantly changes. She gets very excited, already eating the sweets and saying they are delicious and she wants more. But suddenly, she asks the priest about his childhood. Garrison explains he grew up in a place where it was hard to even get a sip of water, let alone food. Most of the friends who grew up with him didn't even reach adulthood, and the name of that place was the Archimon cult. This highly surprises our boy, who wonders, "What do you mean Archimon cult?" He asks himself if he actually created that in the past, but knows he didn't as he has no such memory from his previous life. He wonders what kind of bullshit the lunatic is talking about. The priest with a distant look explains that this is why he must destroy the name that ruined his life and took his young friends, even if he has to sacrifice his own life to do it. Garrison tells Aren to eat her share too, as that is all he can do for now. Soon after, he glares at Klein and warns him that, next time the story won't end like this. The priest simply turns and walks away, as if nothing had happened. Our boy collapses to the ground, completely exhausted and in disbelief, unable to process what just happened and the fact that he almost died. He thinks to himself that out of all people, making a direct enemy out of Garrison isn't something he can do again. Moreover, the priest saying next time means he will come back to try and kill him. In the end, the two of them are locked in a relationship where they will hunt each other until one gives up. At that moment, Aren appears next to Klein, asking if he wants a piece of the cookie, which gives the boy a huge scare. He takes a deep breath and asks if by any chance, Aren likes strawberry cake. She enthusiastically says yes because they are delicious, so he tells her to go to the head chef and say the young master ordered a cake for her. This gets her very excited. He also tells her to eat the entire cake right there in the kitchen and she instantly runs off. Looking at it this way, Klein thinks that the life or death struggle from a moment ago feels completely meaningless. Just then, his father appears beside Klein, calling his name. The boy realizes there is still one major hurdle left to deal with. The Duke warns him they have things to discuss in private. Walking next to his father, Henkel gets straight to the point and asks if he learned necromancy. Klein confirms he did. His father spins around and asks if it was because of the shackles that bound him for 7 years. But why out of all things did he have to mess with necromancy, and how did he do it? Our boy makes up a lie, claiming it was knowledge he found in the annex of his late mother, Grand Duchess Claire. This highly surprises his father. Klein knows it's a lie, but given his past, it's the most plausible excuse. He continues, stating he has no intention of making excuses for not telling him earlier, but necromancy was his only way out. His father argues there was certainly another path, and at the very least his swordsmanship could improve. Klein disagrees, reminding his father of the report Dunkel submitted, stating he has a body with 0 mana. If all he had was swordsmanship, the things he recently accomplished would have never been possible. Klein explains the Empire is using necromancy to erode the North, and since they don't suspect his ability, Henkel must recognize his usefulness before it's too late. The boy knows it's an extreme method, but there is no choice, as his ultimate goal is the family's rebirth. He asks his father to use him as the Rhineland's necromancer. Internally, Klein thinks this is the moment for Henkel Rhineland to make his decision. Dead serious, he looks at his father and says that if Henkel truly believes he is not the reincarnation of Archimonde, then he must use him. Whether his father will use him to save the family or cast him into oblivion is entirely up to him. Henkel turns away, recalling the moment Klein returned to the duchy after being locked up in the reformatory for 7 years. Even after everything, the boy called him father without any resentment, even though he was a pathetic father who failed to take responsibility for his son's future. Klein thinks ironically that Henkel kept that in his heart all this time, when in reality, the kid was just excited about the feeling of freedom after leaving the reformatory. The Duke tells him not to worry. At this point, Henkel admits he has no right or reason to stop him. He tells Klein he can do as he pleases, basically giving his son the green light to use necromancy, which was all our boy ever wanted. Meanwhile, in another location, a majestic woman reading a report states it is time to meet Klein. She asks the girl in front of her to bring him to her, calling her my dear Leah. Leah bows and confirms she understands Grand Duchess Helien's order. Time passed and at night, in a certain village, a sudden attack occurs. A huge brute appears, destroying a house and killing several people. The guards wonder what the hell that guy is, since not even the local mercenary group was a match for him. The people around scream, calling him a monster, and he certainly looked like one. The guards stand up again and in a last-ditch effort, scream to hell with it and that he must die, charging at the brute once more. Unfortunately, the guard takes a brutal punch that deforms his face and throws him to the other side of the village. The only surviving guard starts running, overwhelmed by fear. The giant grabs a rock and throws it at him, creating a crater right in the middle of his chest. The monster stares at his own hands, highly excited, and mutters that he really liked that. Then he picks up an even larger rock and glares at 2 children cornered in an alley. A boy was hugging his sister, crying, saying he was terrified and begging her to save him because he didn't want to die there. Obviously, the girl was also terrified. The brute, with a sadistic smile, tells the children not to cry because it will all be over soon. He throws the massive rock to crush them, expecting them to die instantly. But at that exact moment, he feels something strange behind him. Leah appears out of nowhere to attack him, slashing the back of his neck. She clearly aimed for the head. As soon as she lands, she notices the rock about to crush the kids. Leah quickly dashes past him and, with a powerful kick, knocks the rock aside. She tells the children to hide because the place is too dangerous. While she watches the two run to safety, the monster charges at her. To the brute's surprise, before the strike can hit her, Leah dodges in midair. But as soon as she lands, the monster appears right behind her, ready to crush her with his fists. Laughing and highly excited, he says this is her end, but also praises her strength. Once again, Leah manages to block the attack using the shaft of her spear, which almost snaps in half from the impact. Even her block managed to wound the monster's body. With a swift spear movement, she strikes him and throws him to the other side of the village, sending him crashing hard against the house. Even wounded, the monster remains excited, laughing and saying that one actually hurt a little. But unluckily for him, Leah's spear had already been thrown his way. The brute's reaction was too slow, and the spear sinks deep into his stomach. Even on the verge of death, he keeps smiling. Leah walks up to him as if it were nothing. The other guards run toward her, and one of them reports that this is already the third time this month something like this has happened. The symptoms are always the same: sudden rage, superhuman strength, and eyewitness accounts of strange veins on the attackers' bodies. The monster, still agonizing, starts laughing and says anyone can get strong if they have that. Even stronger than the Archimon from 200 years ago. To his surprise, Leah brutally yanks her spear out and states that no one can become Archimon, and trash like him isn't even worthy of uttering that name. She declares that whatever that is, she will investigate it herself and tear the evil out by its roots. Back at the Rhineland estate, the mansion was completely destroyed. The servants try to rebuild it little by little. One of them comments on the deplorable state of the walls but admits that, considering the scale of the fight that day, it was a relief they were still alive. The other retorts that relief is bullshit because if it wasn't for his grace, Duke Henkel, the entire mansion would have been blown away. One of the servants asks if it's really true that little Oren threw herself in the middle of the fight to stop them, acting like she was their mother. His colleague answers of course not, wondering what kind of strength a little girl like that would have. As they talk, Oren walks past them very innocently, as if nothing had happened, and the servant thinks the girl is getting weirder and weirder. In Klein's office, Oren walks in without even knocking, telling the young master she brought his books. Klein watches her from a distance. She stares at him and casually says he looks very handsome today, so beautiful that women won't leave him alone and will all want to harass him. Astonished, our boy asks where she learns these things. Oren explains she heard the maids talking about a book called The Prince Charming wouldn't be like this. Klein sighs and warns her that next time she wants to read something, she should bring a fairy tale book, and he will read it to her himself. But for now, he will be very busy. On that exact day, a week had passed since Henkel's confrontation with Garrison. In that brief physical clash, several parts of the mansion were destroyed, and the impact was so great that the repairs were already taking days. Our boy knows he would have died too if it weren't for Oren's absurd intervention. But despite everything, if there was one good thing he gained from it, it was the permission and peace of mind to read his books. Dunkel enters Klein's room, announcing that the medical books and theoretical anatomy manuals have arrived. Our boy remembers that back when he was Archimond, he worked like a slave in the magic tower just to learn a single formula. He bent over backwards and plotted complex schemes just to get a single torn page from a grimoire and almost lost his fingers when caught stealing one. In the past, knowledge and studies were inaccessible to anyone who didn't belong to a mage family or the nobility. But now it's different. As a noble, he can obtain knowledge from any field he desires. Flipping through the books, Klein realizes it was exactly as he thought. The old hypothesis was wrong, and the correlation between the mana circulatory system and human blood vessels had been refuted. After all, 200 years had passed since his death. New discoveries, new hypotheses, new mana circuits, and new theories had emerged in the meantime. Reading all of that, he feels a deep sense of ecstasy. It's the first time he's felt anything like this since reincarnating. Highly excited and euphoric, he decides he will absorb absolutely all of this new knowledge. In the background, Oren and Dunkel observe the boy's excitement, wondering what kind of lunatic he is. Amidst the books, our boy glances at one and thinks of the night Londel Rhineland. Dunkel approaches and asks the young master why he is gathering so many anatomy books. Furthermore, he points to a piece of paper and asks what that is. Klein explains it is a spiritual construction formula. Dunkel doesn't understand, and the boy asks if the captain remembers the skeletons he summoned in the mine. If he applies that formula and infuses his demonic energy, Klein demonstrates and a small sand skeleton forms before them, leaving Aren in awe. Klein explains that the necromancy he uses is a bit special. First he makes a contract with the soul using demonic energy, and then he uses the mana contained within the soul itself to manifest a spiritual body. Aren gets very excited staring at the little sand figure. However, the boy explains that most souls cannot manifest a spiritual body more complex than a skeleton because they basically have zero mana, or, even if they do, they lack a sufficiently developed consciousness for it. Although skeletons have the durability of a solid mana body, their internal structure is very simple. They can understand tactics and execute attack and defense orders like an army, but if they face strong knights or mana users, it's hard to guarantee victory. After all, he himself had to find a way to trick Dalton in the forest, but then he asks the question, what if it isn't an ordinary soul? Dunkel is surprised and asks what he means by that. Our boy explains, what if the soul belonged to a knight with sublime mana? Dunkel freezes, wondering if the boy is suggesting what he thinks he is. Klein smiles and says he doesn't know what the captain is imagining, but he shouldn't worry, as he has no plans to do that right now. In his thoughts, Klein knows such strong souls aren't easy to find, and you'd hardly stumble upon one even after scouring an entire battlefield. Either way, he didn't need it at the moment. Just then, Butler Berkman knocks on the door. He informs young Master Klein that the Fallweaver and family sent an invitation, claiming it's about an extremely urgent matter. Fallweaver is Leia's family. Come to think of it, Klein remembers she promised that if he won the duel against the Count's champion, she would give him a kiss. He wonders if the invitation is actually about that. Dunkel finds it strange and asks why there would be an urgent matter only for the young master and not for his grace, the Duke. Berkman explains that the one who sent the invitation was Lady Hellion. This surprises Klein a bit. Dunkel indignantly questions the butler. Is he saying that Hellion, the person who became part of a branch family after marriage, is summoning the main young master to a place full of branch family members? The old butler replies he knows that, but reminds him that Hellion is Duke Henkel's older sister. Besides, since she is the current head of the Fallweaver and family, refusing would be somewhat improper. Right then, Klein decides to accept. In fact, the invitation came at a good time. He wasn't planning on creating that right now, but it seems he just got a reason to. At night, our boy sneaks out of his room, leaving Erin sleeping on the couch. In her sleep, she mumbles, asking for more cookies. Walking through the dark mansion, Klein thinks of Lindell Rhineland, the 6th Duke of the Rhineland family and Henkel's father. He was well known as the strongest knight on the continent, and out of all the dukes in history, he was the only one strong enough to rival the founder, Berkel. However, he was a tragic hero who spent his entire life on the battlefield and died young. Now Klein needs to make him his ally. He reaches his destination, the family mausoleum. Entering the place, he walks up to a specific large coffin. He thinks to himself that most souls have already rested in peace, and not even a trace of them remains there. However, only one remained, a soul still harboring regrets. Klein comments ironically that he has no idea what Henkel would say if he found out about this. Even so, let the exhumation of his ancestors' tomb begin. He mutters to himself that this is the first time they are meeting, and apologizes for being a bit disrespectful to Grandpa. He begins his chant. He calls out to the unfortunate one who is still bound to his living burden, promising to light his path in the name of the guide. If he wishes to walk this path, he must answer his contract. Klein's demonic energy surrounds the ancestor's tomb, and immediately after he feels a strong reaction. Behind the door, an imposing soul approaches him and orders the necromancer to reveal himself. Klein walks out of the mausoleum with the soul, and thinks that apparently the old Duke's reputation was no exaggeration. Lundell absorbed every drop of his demonic energy without flinching. Now out in an open field, our boy thinks about the Death Knights. They are the highest class undead, created by anchoring the soul of a sublime knight into a spiritual body. To seal a contract with such a soul, there are only two options: subjugate it with overwhelming demonic energy, or obtain the soul's own consent and cooperation. The ancestor, absolutely furious, says he initially thought his dear grandson was looking for him for a special reason. He never would have imagined that the archenemy of the Rhineland family had taken over the body of a descendant of his own bloodline. Klein realizes that souls see the essence, not the physical shell, making it impossible to hide the fact that he is Archimon from Lundell. Our boy argues that he already explained the situation through the contract document, and believes the proposal isn't a bad one. The grandfather admits the proposal wasn't bad, and on the contrary, found it quite admirable. But as the former Duke of the Rhineland family, How could he so easily trust his family's archenemy? With that, Lundell creates a massive energy sword and points it at Klein. He charges at the protagonist with full force. Our boy declares that in this case, he will prove there is no falsehood in his contract and guarantee the promise to free his soul. They say a knight's trust comes from his sword, and Klein asks if he's wrong. His grandpa shoots back, saying he's just a brat who just desecrated his own ancestor's tomb and has no right to talk about a knight's trust. Lundell declares that what they are engaged in now is a true duel of insubordination. It is explained that 200 years ago, Emperor Meldy established the Empire, the greatest power on the continent, and his long-standing ambition was to rule every corner of that world without exception. But they couldn't easily control the three great independent ducal houses, the Rhinelands of the north, the Fallweverns of the west, and the Elaces of the east. Thus, the Empire spent a long time preparing a different approach. That approach was none other than Helene, Klein's aunt, Henkel's biological sister, Leia's stepmother, and also the leader of the Branch family's forces. Our boy thinks that the fact she summoned him can only mean one thing, but while he reflects on this, Dunkel appears in the office, announcing he finished organizing the books. Klein praises him and says he plans to move to the Fallwevern estate in 3 days, asking the captain to prepare for the trip. Dunkel notes that according to the invitation, he is not allowed to accompany the young master, and asks if Klein will be alright alone. Klein admits that actually, no, one false move and he might not come back alive. Confused, Dunkel asks why he wants to go then. Klein replies it is the perfect chance to gather information on what Helene is thinking, what she wants from him, and what the true power structure of the Branch family looks like. And, if necessary, he can use his necromancy to turn some of her associates into undead and make them attack each other. Dunkel scolds him, saying he cannot do that because if he acts like that, how would he be any different from the enemies? As a knight that is unthinkable. Klein interrupts him instantly, asking what is the problem with doing bad things to bad people. He reminds Dunkel of what they witnessed at the Conwell mansion, and states the captain knows the situation very well. The Rhineland family is falling apart, and yet those Branch family bastards were living their lives in luxury with the money they wrung out of them. So why the hell is Dunkel coming with that comfortable talk about being a knight? Even so, Dunkel insists the Rhinelands must not abandon their ways. Losing honor and faith to live only for profit is not the path of a knight. Our boy reflects on these two words, honor and faith, and asks if that is really so important. Dunkel firmly replies that yes, it is more important than anything else in the world. Hearing those words, Klein remembers an old acquaintance, Priest Garrison, which leaves him very thoughtful. He then comments with an ironic smile that this is a relief, since he is a wicked necromancer. Back to the present, in the family mausoleum, Klein is finally about to face his ancestor, his grandfather Lundell, who is already charging at him with full force. Klein notes the first strike will be a thrust, and realizes that if he predicts the movement following the frontal attack, he can block the strike. That is exactly what he does. The ancestor steps back and praises the boy, saying he is not bad at all, and that to think a necromancer could use swordsmanship of that level is indeed surprising. Our boy knows that, just by watching the duel between Delane and Dalton, and the explosive clash between Henkel and Garrison, he had already organized the principles and techniques in his mind. Now all he had to do was use them in real combat, and master the combinations. On the other hand, Lundell warns that this doesn't matter, because in his eyes, Klein is full of openings. He surprises the boy by advancing with an underhanded strike, but, to the old ghost's surprise, our boy is much more agile now. Just as he did in the past, he tries to quickly get behind him to subdue him, attacking with the meteor strike. But, with extreme ease, the ancestor turns around saying not so fast, and blocks the attack as if it were nothing. When Klein lands on the ground, the old ghost admits that was surprising. He truly didn't think the boy could withstand his heavy techniques using a body with 0 mana. In fact, he acknowledges Klein has a very useful talent. Klein glares at him very seriously. He remembers that this is Lundell Rhineland, the 6th Duke of the family and the man who once held the title of the strongest knight on the continent, gaining majesty through his special swordsmanship. Lundell changes the subject and asks if Klein has been having fun pretending to be Henkel's brat. The ghost comments that although Henkel is his son, the guy doesn't have a single drop of intuition. He laughs and asks if Henkel isn't going to faint the moment he finds out the son he raised so affectionately is the infamous Archimond. Our boy finds it curious that besides being incredibly strong, the former Duke's way of speaking is quite vulgar and foul-mouthed. With a little smile on his face, Klein replies he has no idea what the reaction will be, but that, just like his father, Henkel is pretty slow on the uptake. the ancestor gets excited by the boy's audacity. He comments that seeing the boy insult his own parents like that makes him truly believe Klein has his blood. But, in the end, the conversation doesn't matter, as he warns he will go all out from now on. Facing Londo's combat stance, Klein is surprised. He recognizes the fateful swordsmanship created by the Duke himself, a technique that fell into oblivion due to its extreme complexity. The sword's trajectories scatter and appear as several branches opening up in the air. This is a unique secret technique that makes it impossible to tell which blade is real. The famous phantom sword. Lundell already charges at Klein. The boy braces himself and analyzes coldly. All the sword trajectories except one are fake. He shouldn't look at the blade. What he has to do is predict and dodge. He deduces the strike will probably be a horizontal slash from the right, and manages to dodge in time. He estimates the next one will be a horizontal slash from the left, but guesses wrong. The strike comes straight from above, aiming for his head. With a leap, Klein manages to dodge at the last second. He understands the logic. The first strike was just a feint, and he has to predict the more irregular sequence that will follow. He calculates the next attack will come from behind, but misses again with the strike appearing from the left. Fortunately, at the last instant, he raises his weapon and manages to block the impact. But Lundell's physical strength, even as a spiritual body, is brutal, sending Klein flying to the other side of the field. Lying on the ground, the boy realizes the true strength of the phantom sword. He concludes that the amount of mana contained in his grandfather's spiritual body must be no different from that of a living elite knight. The ancestor warns him not to underestimate the mana efficiency of northern swordsmanship. Furthermore, he boasts that this is a devilish technique that not even his own sons could learn. Therefore, no matter how good a necromancer Klein is, breaking the pattern of that technique is impossible. But our boy stands up with a very confident expression. He admits he really didn't expect to be pushed to his limit so quickly, but that doesn't matter, because now he will go all out too. Basically, Klein mimics the exact same phantom sword stance as his ancestor. He says he has already seen the technique with his own eyes, and that in the end it's not a particularly difficult sword style to learn. Highly irritated by his audacity, the ancestor calls him an arrogant brat and says that is not a technique that can be copied just by seeing it once. A moment of tense silence falls over the field as the two glare at each other. Lundell prepares himself on one side, and Klein waits for the exact moment on the other. Finally, the two charge at each other, activating the phantom sword. Finally, the two charge at each other, activating the phantom sword. The countless fake blades head straight to clash in the air. When the trajectories meet, the ancestor yells at Archimonde not to be so full of himself. Lundell questions why a necromancer would help his greatest enemy's family, and why he of all people, the mere demon of the continent, would do something like that. Upon hearing the words, demon of the continent, our boy hesitates. He stops his attack and is almost killed by his grandfather's strike. Lundell's sword stops mere inches from Klein's head. Confused, the ancestor pulls his weapon back and asks why he did that, since he clearly could have dodged or blocked the strike. Our boy looks at him and answers, honor and faith. The answer surprises the old ghost. Klein continues, saying it seems knights carry those ideals as if they were worth their own lives. He confesses he lived his entire previous life as a dark necromancer and could never understand that. In fact, he found it quite pathetic, but he met someone who suffered the same pain as him, and yet made the opposite choice to protect the children's future. Klein warns he doesn't care what Lundell thinks of him. What he really wants is to live and see for himself this future that guy mentioned. Hearing this, the ancestor becomes very thoughtful. He reveals that the reason he became a wandering spirit is due to a deep grudge he couldn't let go of. He states he had no intention of telling a guy like Archimonde what that grudge was. However, perhaps the answer to his bitterness might lie in this future the boy mentioned. Thus, he makes his decision and declares that therefore he, Lundell Rhineland, will accept the contract. This greatly surprises our boy, who immediately breaks into a sincere smile. Klein is very happy and says that's fine, since resolving unfinished business is a necromancer's job. He warns it will be a mutual contract of equality and not a subordination contract. Klein even offers him to read the terms of the contract one more time just in case. The ancestor dismisses the formality and tells him to forget the terms, suggesting they just make a subordination contract, as it would be faster and easier for both of them. But our boy refuses. He argues he is already turning the soul of a sacred ancestor into a death knight, and if he makes a contract forcing his subordination, he really will be the villain of the story. The ancestor just laughs, asking if Archimonde actually has a conscience now. Lundell hardens his expression and declares, I, Lundel Rhineland, the deceased, entrust my thoughts and grudges to the guide. Our boy raises his hand and continues the oath. I, Archimon the guide, inherit the thoughts and grudges of the deceased, and until the desire is fulfilled, Archimon the guide will light your path. The old Duke finishes. Until the desire is fulfilled, I, Lundel Rhineland, the deceased, shall become your sword. Thus the contract is magically sealed between the two. After a few seconds, the ancestor changes his form, covering himself in the sand body prepared by Klein. He moves around and asks the boy if he will be able to handle the consequences of having him and using him like that. Our boy, overflowing with confidence, watches the sand take shape and answers that since he is moving well, there is no problem. He taunts Lundel asking why a lingering soul would be so worried about a living person. Klein glares at the new Death Knight, Lundel Rhineland, and asks if he now wants to accompany him to meet his dear aunt.